I appreciate you saying something, but like it was an amazing day, great people, and really, really good time. And that was the one point of the day where I had like a bit of a pit in my stomach. And nothing.
What we have here on earth, right? We have the choice to accept God into our hearts and be with him, or we have the choice of rejecting him and being apart from him.
Not reading it right, it's going to drive you nuts. God is not the author of confusion, right? So he wants clarity on these subjects.
Ooh, that was a bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get this, we're on our way to Universal, right? And I had told you about on the Miami trip how my coworker, like there was just a lot of synchronicities. Like as soon as I thought, like when we got separated on the road, as soon as I thought we're going to catch up to each other, they came up. I told my passengers when they woke up from a nap what the plan was, and Natalie is going to call whenever they're ready. Second that I said that, Natalie calls like this and that. Well, Bree's on her way over, and I'm playing guitar, playing all-time low songs to get into it. And I said when she came in, I'm like, I just want to play one more song. As soon as that last note finished ringing out, Natalie texted me, and so now we're on the way over. So I start telling Bree this stuff. I get a notification on my phone as a YouTube notification, and it was a video that All Time Low posted, and the title said, I don't know if you can see it, but it's that top one. It said All Time Crow. And I was
I saw was, I'm bald, please help.
But it said All Time Crow. And I'm like, okay, this is just weird at this point. So the last ride that we went on before we went to go find our seats, Bryce and I are on the phone, and we're in line for the Mummy, and we get up the stairs, and I can see that it's like the parts where you get on the ride. So I said bye to Bryce. As soon as we hang up and we get walking into our line, I look over and I realize, how about that? And it's two members of All Time Low in the line, like right next to us. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Like, I just thought it was kind of cool. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, but whatever's going on with these crows, man, like that's something that I want to talk about. Like,
dude, you're going to go live with the crows. You're going to be crow man. You're going to give up your life and go and live with two crows.
Bree was thinking that at 7:12 that evening, I was going to turn into a crow. And I'm like, honestly, like we're all in a circle, like just talking. And then everyone's like, where'd Travis go? And then they look down and there's just like a crow sitting up. And I'm like, why are you guys all so tall? And, but yeah, so either way, like, with all of the situations, for example, that crows do, like the fact of the matter is, I'm not trying to say it means one thing or another. But I haven't gained any wisdom or like answers from that.
This is going to be you.
With
your crow man. You live with the crows now.
It's so good. So good. But yeah, like I haven't learned what it's supposed to mean or anything yet. But the fact is that crows, like the way that they keep popping up, there's no denying that the pattern of them showing up in significant moments, right? So when I used to call them like my spirit guides and my spirit animals and stuff with what I learned from MJ, I kind of don't call them that anymore. I think of them more now as my guardian angels. And because of my connections that I've always had with St. Francis and with animals, it makes sense to me that God likes to send messages to me in the form of animals. And because of the way that things keep happening the way that they do, and the things that do happen are significant and good, my point that I was making to James was that I cannot fathom and I cannot like make sense of it being a bad thing, like being sent from like someone that isn't God. because like animals are pure, animals are good, you know, and sure, they're not always safe, but that doesn't make them evil. Like, you know, a serpent isn't inherently evil, but, you know, don't be surprised if you get bitten if you're going to be messing with one, you know? And so, where I'm kind of on right now with this part of my journey is I'm praying for a lot of discernment and a lot of wisdom to come from that. And I think like I think guardian angels, spirit animals, and spirit guides is kind of a hand in hand topic, and I'd love to dive into it a little bit more. So that's one that I've got ammo on for sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. Would that tie into like the spirits? I guess that would tie into like the spirits, angels, and demons kind of topic.
Well, yeah. So when I was talking to him about this, I actually was talking about how angels are like messengers. You know, how it's like it's not like the word angel is not a description of like a race or like a culture. It's the description. It's like a job description essentially.
It's like
So
a
they
rank.
could, right, like they could be different. I don't know what the word would be. Not race, but they could be different like
Species.
species. Yeah, exactly. Um, and I thought it was interesting. I was telling him about Akiane Kramarik or Kramarik. I don't know how you pronounce her name. I think I've talked to you about this, Bryce, but she was the girl that was raised by like atheist family members. Like no one in her family was Christian at all. Didn't have any knowledge of it.
I don't know if we've talked about this.
Oh, so she was raised out in like a farmland too. Her whole story is on YouTube. She has a YouTube channel, so you check that out if you guys get some time. But she had like no possible way of learning about the gospel out there. Like there wasn't even a Bible in the house, nothing. There wasn't anything around. Like they're out in a country town. And when she's like this little kid, she starts claiming that she's visiting heaven and that she's like talking with Jesus and she's going to these places and getting shown all this stuff. And she starts learning about all this biblical stuff without ever being taught that. And like her parents aren't Christian or anything like that. So they don't even have knowledge of it. And then it turns out she is like a prodigy when it comes to painting. And she starts painting like these insane pictures and portraits at like a very, very young age that like most people can never hope to achieve in their lifetime. So she ends up getting the idea that she needs to paint the face of Jesus. So she does, and it's called the Prince of Peace. It's a pretty popular painting. And lo and behold, there's also another story with another kid who was raised by Christian parents. His dad was like a preacher and everything, but he ended up dying from appendicitis, and then going to heaven and coming back with like all this knowledge that he should not have had. That one's called Heaven is for Real. It's a book. They also made a movie about it. Not to be confused with the one that was the kid who faked going to heaven. I think his name was Alex Malarkey. So different story, but the kid's parents, Colton's parents is his name. Whenever they would show him a picture of Jesus, they would be like, "Is this Jesus?" And then they would be like Colton would be like, "Nope." And then he would say like what was wrong with it. And then it got to the point where they would just show so many things over and over where they just got to the point where it said, "What's wrong with this one?" Like they wouldn't even be like, "Is this him?" It's just, "What's wrong with this one?" And then they showed him the Prince of Peace and he goes, "Oh no, that's him." And they're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, but the eyes are wrong." And the thing that bothered Akiane the most was that she could not get his eyes correct. Yeah. So there's been multiple people who have seen this picture now and be like, "That's who I saw." Really fascinating.
And as far as
Yeah, that is really interesting.
as
I
far
pulled
as
it up actually.
did you guys not see me share my screen?
Yeah,
I don't
you didn't broadcast. I think we had to put it on stage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
So that's the second one right there. Or sorry, that's the original.
Yeah, if
There's
you
another
scroll
one that
down
she
a
did.
little bit, you should see a picture of her next to it. Actually, I think that's her right there.
Yeah, that wasn't when she was a kid. That's when she painted it.
Wow.
Yeah, she's like our age roughly.
Yeah,
She is now.
Mhm.
and like something interesting about like the way
Yeah,
that
that's
it's
her right there. The middle
it's
one,
the-
the blue shirt.
This one
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, it's more what she looks like now.
oh, she's pretty.
She is pretty.
Wow,
What?
that's pretty crazy though. That's a really good painting.
Yeah.
I do remember this. So we must have talked about this a while ago.
Well, there's also another. Let me pull it up on YouTube real quick. I can share it with you guys.
I put you on YouTube and you see what we do.
So this is pretty cool. You guys know what the Shroud of Turin is?
Yeah.
The what?
The Shroud of Turin.
I'm not sure.
It's the piece of cloth that they believe to
that
be
they've
the
been.
cloth that was over Jesus's face.
Did they like scan it and like get an image of his face?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I have seen that.
So this is the Shroud of Turin with the painting.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Like
That
the
is
facial
wild.
structure, the bones and everything like match up like almost perfectly.
Yeah, that's pretty
Like
wild.
obviously the face looks slightly different, but like look at the bone structure
Right.
and like the nose.
Well, yeah, and you're scanning it from a piece of cloth. Like it's not going to be perfect, right? Like because the cloth wouldn't have been laying perfectly on his face, like imprinting every little detail. But that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, so there's people attesting to like, seeing some like of going like near death experiencers, at least like seeing her paintings and being like, that's what I saw. And another one of her famous paintings is called The Messenger, and it's just an eagle or like a bird of some sort. I don't know if it's an eagle flying into a cave, and it's like essentially portraying that like an animal is a messenger. It's like a portrayal of like an angel.
Right, because the angels are always like described as coming to people, and isn't like one of the first things that most of them say is do not be afraid. Like,
Right.
because like, and they come in forms because like the whole thing is that if a mortal person were to look upon their true form, their mind would break. They can't fathom like the pure, like it's kind of like in the Percy Jackson books when the Greek gods like revert back to their original form, and like they say, everybody, you got to like close your eyes and stuff. And so if they
There's
can,
a man and a horse. Oh, it's an Indian. Look at that. I didn't even remember that.
Interesting.
right, because that's what I was thinking about with this whole like Indian spirituality and everything, that there was just what felt so different about theirs than a lot of other pre-Christianic religions was that like with the gods or like they all had like gods and stuff, but the Indians, they called it the Great Spirit, and they acknowledged like the omens that came from different animals, and like the whole emphasis on living with the land instead of living off of the land. It just feels to me a lot more harmonious than a lot of other kind of ancient religions,
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree.
I mean, sure, a lot of Indian tribes like were brutal to each other and stuff, but that's neither here nor there.
Here's
Well,
a
yeah, I
better.
mean, when you're reading through the Old Testament, you realize that there's a lot of brutality that goes on
Yeah,
throughout it. It's human nature, I feel like.
that's a better close-up picture of it. This is her
Yeah,
website.
it's pretty sweet.
There's
Yeah,
let me see. Go to her gallery here. She has some insane paintings.
she's phenomenal.
Yeah, this is another one of Jesus.
The vision that took her 19
Wow.
years to paint.
Yeah. It's so like clear too. Like it's amazing how much detail is in
It
this
looks
picture.
like a photograph.
I know.
Look at this photograph.
Actually,
Yeah,
even has like a close up of his eye.
wow. Holy crap, man.
Yeah, like look how much detail is on that, like
Oh my
down to the
gosh.
fibers on his shirt. Isn't that insane?
Wow. That
It's
is
beautiful.
pretty crazy.
Yeah, and my whole thing is that with like what MJ taught me about spirit guides and spirit animals, like modern people have like devolved spirit animal to mean like, oh my God, like what animal are you? Like my spirit animal is a lion because I love my friends and I'm really brave. You know what I mean? What
Right. Yeah.
what MJ taught me was that it's that spirit animals aren't the same thing as what they say. The idea that she presented was that you can have a million spirit guides, and what it is that they're animals that will show up in your life. For example, you're walking by a group of people and you hear them talking about elephants, and then you're watching TV, you're flipping through the channels, and you happen to see a documentary about elephants, and then you have a dream about elephants. That's your spirit guide, the elephant, trying to pass wisdom to you. And when you do the research into what and the books and the teachings of what the elephant means, it's sometimes it's all safety and warnings and whatnot. And the idea is that your guides are just essentially what guardian angels do in the verbiage that she used. Your spirit animal is more so, what was the one animal that was when you were in the crib? What was the one that was looking in there as your like straight up guardian? Like that's always there with you. And the whole point is that there's no personal gain or power that's gained from these messages or these communications. It's all just lessons, wisdom, and things like that. So with that in mind, my question is that like if angels can always appear in these different forms and everything like that, and they're vessels, messengers, and emissaries and whatnot, you know, number one, it stands to reason to me that God would could use animals to send a message. I mean, what wasn't it that the on the day, like however long the flood was with Noah, when the dove brought him the olive branch, that's how he knew, or like the branch, that's how he knew that there was land again. Something like that, right? Like on the day when the sun
Yeah.
Yeah, he's sent off the doves though.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a while since I knew anything about Noah's Ark. I apologize, but
That's
I
all
mean
good.
the point is that I can't see, like I'm having a hard time fathoming that animals would be used by, or like I guess could be, but I don't know. I can't see the way that the animals have communicated to me and like what I've learned from them. It doesn't make sense for me that that isn't something from God, you know?
Well,
So I'd
yeah,
love
I mean, I think you're hitting it on the nose. Like it's not meant to be like you're gaining some sort of extra knowledge or anything like that. If anything, it's a messenger from God where it's like confirmation of something. Um, and I think that that's what's so fascinating about like a lot of this new age stuff is that they are tapping into a lot of the spirituality concept, but they're removing God from the picture. And
Mhm.
they're like actually noticing these things that are happening in the quote unquote spiritual realm, and they're on to something a lot more like going on like in the extraterrestrial sense that the modern day church is not picking up on. And I think that the church really needs to kind of start re-examining this. And this is actually something that I give kudos to like the Catholic Church for doing, because they still very much believe in that kind of stuff, you know.
Mm.
Me and Vance were actually talking about that last night. We got into a pretty lengthy conversation about that and like the gifts of the spirit and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
want to yeah, I want to say that I didn't really think about this before until um Travis, you started mentioning that like you think like with your connection with like animals and stuff like that, like that's how God has been able to talk to you lately. I didn't really ever think about like God talking to us in like different ways, like using the world. You know
Well,
what I
let
mean?
me.
Like, because I've been thinking about that for myself. Like sometimes you hear testimonies of people who like they hear like Jesus's voice in their head, like clear as day. Like they know it's Jesus. He says it's him. Like I've never had an experience like that myself, right? I've never had like heard the voice of God in my head. Like I've had voices come into my head where I'm like, okay, that thought just kind of popped up or whatever, you know, where it's just kind of random or whatever. But I never thought about that either. Like I'm more of like a numbers type of guy.
Mhm.
And, you know, I have realized that like I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time whenever I see like the number 21, because that's been my lucky number for years, forever, since I
Mhm.
can remember.
Supposedly, it's a biblical number too. It's like 7 and 3.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
There's
So
also a really fun game called Blackjack that 21's a big deal in.
yeah. Yeah, but I'll see it on like people's license plates. Like I'm stuck in traffic. I'm like, whatever. I guess I'll just cruise. And then all of a sudden I'll be like looking in front of me. I'm like, oh, look at that. It's at 21. I guess I'm supposed to be here right now. Like I timed things correctly or something. But I didn't like ever think that like that's how like God would talk to people differently is like through because he knows who we are in our heart, right? You know,
Mhm.
he knew us before we were born. He knows what's in our heart, so he knows how to talk to us. And
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because I think that you can learn how to read the signs. So, like, there's the story of Balaam in the Bible, which is kind of a fascinating one. And I first heard about it when I was reading through Revelation, and he was like, "For this, like, you're essentially going to be falling under the sign of Balaam, which is like a very much alluding to like not a good thing." And I'm like, "Who's Balaam? I don't know this story." So he's in the Old Testament. And then I go back and read it, and he was a man that could read signs, um, and could interpret essentially a lot of the spiritual aspects going on. A very weird story. There's like a talking donkey in it and everything. But
Who you
ultimately,
calling donkey?
huh?
Who you calling donkey? I'm just picturing Eddie Murphy.
Yeah. Uh, so eventually he gets hired by this king, like a Gentile king, to curse the Israelites. And he's like, I can't do that, dude. Like, they're under God's protection and power. Like, I can't, no matter what I do, I can't do it. Like, if I curse them, it's only going to end up good for them because, like, this is just the way it works. So the king was like, I'll pay you everything you want. Like, I will literally give you everything you want if you curse them. He's like, dude, I can't. Like, physically, I it can't be done. It's like, you can give me all the money in the world. I still can't do it. But then he ended up saying, look, I can't curse them, but they can curse themselves. And he told the king this. And because he told the king this, it was like a very bad thing for Balaam to do. Right. So they actually ended up tempting the Israelites to fall into sin. So that's how they ended up doing it. And they brought sin upon themselves versus like getting casted it upon them. But I still think it's an interesting story because like you look at Balaam and he's this guy who could do all these like insane things, kind of like a witch doctor. And he knew how to interpret the signs, I think is what it says in the Bible. So like there are things going on. And within the signs, there can be things from God, but there can also be signs from things that aren't God as well. That I think, you just have to be careful with. So, like, I would say my only word of caution within what you were talking about, Travis, would be that you can't fathom how any of this could be bad, right?
Let me, yeah, continue your thought. I wanna clarify something about that. But yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think just a word of caution moving forward because I think like you're hitting a lot of things like on the nose pretty fairly, but to say that all animals are good um is kind of like saying all humans are good. You know what I mean? Like there can, I think, be a fall in there.
I agree wholeheartedly because there's a couple different dials that I want to hit, but for the I can't fathom part, allow me to explain a little bit better. It's more so the way that because I guess I'm using crows as a specific example, but because of what has happened every single time that they keep coming around, I'm having a hard time seeing how that's not a godsend instead of a deception, right? Even with that though, because something did happen at the concert last night that was very interesting, but um, it's where regardless of what conclusions I'm coming to and where everything at the end of the day, uh, it's above my pay grade to truly understand. So I'm leaving it out of my hands, and instead of interpreting them the way that I used to always do through my own arrogance of thinking I'm spiritually connected, it's okay, I'm seeing something, and in my heart I know there's something being said. So I'm just praying harder and harder to discern it. You know what I mean? I'm not saying there is or isn't this and that about it. I'm just really looking forward to learning. You know what I mean? And this thing that happened that was interesting was that uh whenever we had right after we were on the ride where like saw a couple of the members of the band, we went back to where everyone was getting their seats for the concert. We found our little spot and we were set. I looked in front of me and like maybe like 20 feet away, laying down, was my old bar manager from Sugar Factory. Lovely woman named Britton. I haven't seen her since before I quit. So I went over there to go say hello. Like finally got to meet her boyfriend. And I was just saying like a quick little what's up and ask her how she's been. And she mentions be coming by a little bit later too. And I went, "Oh, okay." And I said, if you would be so kind as to not mention that we ran into each other, where she and I aren't on speaking terms. And she goes, "Yeah, I heard. That's why I wanted to give you a heads up." And it made me feel a little off for a little while, but like it was an amazing day, great people, and really, really good time. And that was the one point of the day where I had like a bit of a pit in my stomach. And nothing came about, nothing happened or anything. But I was talking to my coworker Danny, who's very much, very, very involved in her faith and in her church and everything. And she was saying that, well, she started talking about spiritual warfare, and it's the same thing that you said before, James. That when you start to really connect with God and really like start working in your faith, that's when the devil starts to go after you a little bit harder, right? And so it was an interesting thing that this was a great day, pros again, but then bada bing, bada boom, that happens, right? I'm not saying that all animals are inherently good like that. It's just more so that, you know, animals are, I think, blessed in a different way than people are because, like, an animal does something that we were to do. If we were to do it, it would be evil. Like there's a group of people walking around and there's one that's a lot younger than everybody, and we go after the young one, kill it, and eat it. That's a pretty horrific, evil thing. But lions do that to a herd of zebra, and that's just nature. Cruel, absolutely, but evil, I mean, there's no morality behind animals. You know what I mean? That's just the pure nature. But that's what separates us from them is that we have the morality to choose good things and to not be instinctual like that. You know what I mean? And because like if I were to like be asking for a sign from God and he sends me a lion and a lion walks into my apartment, it's probably not a good thing. I don't know if I could go toe to toe with a lion. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's just that's the kind of thought that I was like going with. And I found that page in this book that talks about magic that I think was what we were talking about. I want to read this little passage right here. Um, we now arrive at the central point of our discourse, magic. It would not have made sense to speak of Satanism and black masses without seriously confronting the subject of magic. On this topic, the Catechism of the Catholic Church furnishes the best definition. All practices of magic or sorcery by which one attempts to tame occult powers so as to place them at one's service and have a supernatural power over others, even if this were for the sake of restoring their health, are gravely contrary to the virtue of religion. Church condemns such practices on the basis of revelation and on the conviction that in Spiritism and occultism, it is the devil who is acting. The exorcists, as always, testify to this without a shadow of a doubt. The definition of magic tells us two things. Above all, it has ambition. Through the utilization of evil spells, the evil eye, charms, magic filters, rituals, invocations, cursed foods, and drinks ingested by the victims, crystal balls, etc., to modify and foretell the course of human events, and to utilize the preternatural demonic powers to make a person fall in love, be cured from an illness, be dismissed from a job, kill somebody, provoke atmospheric events, etc. In other words, magic is a practice used to do evil things and to influence people and the reality created by the devil. That was the part that stuck out to me, is that magic and all this like astrology and all of the like the new age and the Wiccan stuff is that it is using those things to have control and dominion over the reality and the real physical world, right? That is what I've been learning, is that like that makes sense to me as to why that's evil, you know, and why that's, you know, it comes from the devil. If the devil has control and dominion over the earth and heaven is God's territory and everything like that. Because didn't you say that it was in the book of Enoch, James, that it was the first round or so of fallen angels that started teaching humanity those powers?
Yes.
Right. So the fact is that those powers exist. That stuff is real. And, you know, nowadays society like loves to do horoscopes and everything like that. But having like the actual, like actually trying to put power over those things, that's, you know, that's the black stuff. And he goes on a little bit further to talk about black magic, white magic, and red magic and everything. Very, very interesting stuff. But as far as linking that to this spirit animal and spirit guide thing, if that's the definition of magic and these evil occultish things, the difference that I'm finding is that the messages that I feel like I've been receiving from my animals for a while, they're not giving me any dominion or power or control over the physical earth or anything like that. It's just I see a crow happen to show up on a literally like right next to me when I'm having a day where I need to pray a little bit harder, and I end up having a good night after I pray a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's just that's where if that's like kind of like what I've been experiencing and feeling. So I'd love to, that's why I like to talk about this stuff, try to figure it out a little bit more, you know?
Yeah.
And my last note, from what this was Bryce, with you talking about the numbers thing and how God speaks to you and everything, and he speaks to people differently. Well, you remember how in the James's story about the Prince of Peace with that, and in the heaven is for real, he kept getting the eyes wrong. And then the painter was saying that the eyes were the hardest thing. Well, do you remember, Bryce, in the Percy Jackson books, when Percy met Aphrodite for the first time in the limo?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a mention of when he gets in the limo and he meets Aphrodite for the first time, her face is constantly changing. And it makes sense. If she's the goddess of beauty and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, he said that even though her face is changing and her eyes are changing, there is a level of her that starts to look like Annabeth, who he's in love with. And so just from that, using the idea that someone who isn't human being able to kind of, you know, like she's not purposely using her powers to change her face. It's just everyone's seeing it a little bit differently. Well, it feels like that helps me understand and make sense about the eyes thing. Like, you know, if Jesus I think it was you, James, who said that someone had mentioned, or there was multiple mentions, that when you look Jesus in the eye in these stories and everything, his eyes are like always like changing and like, or like they're made of like pure light or something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
People
don't
are
they
always
describe him
saying,
as like fire in the Bible? At
In
some
the
like,
yes. So
after the
all of that,
resurrection?
yes. Huh?
That's after the resurrection, right?
No, that's how he looks in heaven. Well, yeah, so I would be after the
The-
resurrection.
yeah.
But yeah, so the NDEs explain it as like when they come back, they say that his eyes are like the most amazing thing, like almost without fail. If someone meets Jesus in an NDE, they're like raving about his eyes, just how beautiful they are. And then some people equate it to light. Some people say it's like a dark green. Some people say it's like gold. It's kind of fascinating. But in Revelation, when we're seeing Jesus in his heavenly, like God like form, it's kind of like this older version of Jesus. He has like pale white hair. He has like bronze feet and a sword coming out of his mouth and eyes of fire. So it's like, okay, this is kind of a crazy depiction of him, but like that's like his end times heavenly version of what he's looking like, you know. And then also like in Revelation, when John's getting a look into heaven, uh, in regards to like the tribulation and the end times, when they're standing around the council saying who is worthy enough to save everyone, essentially, Jesus actually shows up and comes forward, but he shows up as a lamb, and he's like this like heavenly figure of like a lamb coming forward. So like in heaven, he definitely changes form without a doubt.
And I guess the reason I bring that up is because the idea that, like you said, Bryce, like, you know, if he knows what's in our heart and everything, he would know how to reach us in the most effective way. And this is something that I I brought up to James, and I've talked about it a little bit before, but in my own, like, with our faith, with our Bible study and our church and everything, in my own personal one, what I've been really wanting to dive into and everything is this really strong memory I have from pre-K when I was in Catholic church, and pre-K was like my first school ever, and at Our Savior's, 4 years old, and I remember one day when we came in um, to school, like the beginning of the day was like before school started, everybody that was showing up, it was like centers and playtime and stuff. So that's when the parents would be coming, dropping us off. About 10 minutes after everybody would leave, that's when we would start classes and stuff. And on this day, I remember a whole bunch of coloring sheets, like the ones you were talking about with you and Bailey doing with those kids. And
Yeah.
it was all like blank, colorful sheets of saints. And our assignment was get your favorite saint and color in his picture. And then we'll talk about them. Well, the thing is, we're like 4 years old. You know, we don't have favorite saints. We don't know anything about them other than,
Right.
oh yeah, we Saint Francis, Saint Michael, Saint yada yada.
Yeah, you
And
know the different ones, but you're like, "Well, how do I have a favorite?" Like,
you know how kids are, like the younger kids are, the more connected they are. Like those children who've never met their grandparents who passed away before they were born, like where they're like, Papa's saying hi, and they're pointing at like an empty corner of the wall. Or
right,
like,
yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, it definitely seems like kids are definitely more in tune with like the spiritual side
And
of things.
I think because they're so fresh, I think it's because they haven't been beaten down by society telling them God's not real and magic's not real and logic and science is the only way. They haven't, it's a condition, you know what I mean? But our natural state is these luminous things. And so the saint that I picked was Saint Francis. And Saint Francis's gift was that he could communicate to animals. And the story that I remember was him like he's making his travels and he comes across a farm that's being plagued by a wolf and it keeps going after the sheep. And it was this little boy and his dog. And it was like one of those like herding dogs that were meant to like fight wolves and stuff, but it's just a little boy, this and that. And St. Francis comes along them when the wolf is going after the sheep. he steps in between and he asks the wolf to leave and commands the wolf to walk away with his words. And the wolf listens. So St. Francis could literally talk to animals. That was his gift. And I feel like I feel like the teachers might not have been doing this intentionally, but they may have been cooking. Like in Avatar, when we learn about when in the flashback, when we learn about when Aang found out he was the Avatar, you know how the Avatar is reincarnated, right? Like very Buddhism kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they tell him that, do you remember these 4 toys? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. I loved playing with these. They said that when he was just a little tiny kid, he was presented with a bunch of toys, but he picked those 4 out. And Aang says, I picked them because they seemed like fun. But the thing is, that's the test, is that every single avatar has always picked those 4. And that's how they knew he was the avatar, because he was following the same footsteps. And I think like there's a chance that they may have been onto something. And I feel like I picked St. Francis because there was a connection that I had to him. And I always had a thing with animals. And I know a lot of people say that, like, they're always like, oh yeah, I'm the guy that when dogs don't like men, I'm the one that they like. But, and I don't need to explain or justify it, but I've had a lot of, like, way too many significant moments with animals to not feel like this is worth praying about and worth diving into for my own journey. And with all of that, all of the things we've been talking about with adding the spirit animals and spirit guides and stuff, that's I feel like that's just the way that God communicates with me, is through animals. Like, sure, he's not only using animals or stuff like that, but I think that's I again
A
think I'm not
method that
no
is being used. Yeah. I mean,
yes
I have the same thing. I've had like significant things pop up with animals in my lifetime as well. Like we've had many conversations about that kind of stuff. I think it's
absolutely
a vessel essentially that is used by God in his greatness to be able to give us confirmation of things sometimes. And like you said, I think as long as you're learning how to utilize it properly, that's what's the most important, right? So you're not trying to gain something out of it, but rather it's kind of like what you said happened the other day. It was like kind of tap on the shoulder, be like, pray about it, and it's like you
exactly
did, and then now, so it's like, okay, so when I'm seeing these messengers, what is it? What is it getting at? What is the outcome of seeing these messengers? It's like means I need to go talk to God, means I
right
need to get closer in communion with him. And if you're utilizing it in that proper way, then yes, it's going to be good. But it can also be misconstrued where sometimes you have to get to like the cloud. It's just a cloud type thing,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely
Because if you're not putting that, if you're seeing a sign but you're not reading it right, it's going to drive you nuts. God is not the author of confusion, right? So he wants clarity on these subjects.
Ooh, that was a bar.
Yeah, that's a famous saying.
I like
So
that. God is
it,
not the author of confusion. That's
yeah,
cool.
that's oftentimes how I know uh how I'm able to discern certain things, because if I'm like starting to get depressed over a situation, um or like it's really like tearing me up inside, um because I feel conflicted, it's most likely not coming from God. It's usually going to be pretty clear. That being said, God's going to tell you to do stuff that like you don't want to do sometimes. There's not going to be any conflict, right?
Yeah,
But that's going to be a different kind. Have to kind of learn how to wean that in.
right. And a big thing that's brought up in this book, I was telling James about it, was that I, I can actually pull up the passage for it, and he's talking about, okay, so literally just found it right here. Can the devil read our thoughts? We have now arrived at the specific action of the devil, and we begin with the first question. Can the devil know our thoughts? Is he able to understand what we are thinking at a certain moment in our life? The response is simple. Absolutely not. Theology is agreed on this question. Only God, who is omniscient, who intimately possesses the secrets of created reality, that of men and angels, and that of uncreated reality, which is his own essence, knows in depth the thoughts of each man. Although a spiritual creature, the demon does not understand what is in our mind and in our heart. He can only surmise it through observing our behavior. It is not a complicated operation for him, having an extremely fine intelligence. If a young person smokes marijuana, for example, the demon can deduce that in the future he will also use stronger drugs. In a word, from what we read, see, say, and experience, and from the companions we choose, even from our glances, from all this, he can discern where he will tempt us and at which particular moment. And that is what he does. This brings to mind a passage from the first letter of St. Peter. Brothers and sisters, be sober, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith. My interpretation of this passage, on which various biblicists are agreed, sounds like this. Brothers and sisters, be vigilant. The devil wanders around each one of you, searching where to devour. The word where is important. The devil looks in each person precisely for his weak point and works on it, creating his next sinful occasions, those that he has commissioned for him. It will be the targeted person himself who, in his liberty, will commit the sin after having been well cooked by Satan's temptation. And the most frequent weak points in man are from time to time always the same: pride, money, and lust. And let us note well, there are no age limits for sin. When I hear confessions, I often say to my pensions, somewhat jokingly, that their temptations will only end 5 minutes after they have exhaled their last breath. Therefore, we must not presume or hope that at an advanced age we will be exempt from sin. A vice that is cultivated in youth will not lessen in old age without some work and intervention. Let us consider lust. When I hear confessions, it's not uncommon for the elderly to confess to looking at pornography more often than the youth. The will to struggle against sin must be cultivated even to the end of our days. So, with that passage about can the devil read our thoughts, that was eye-opening to me in the sense that it makes perfect sense that, James, if you even say God is not the author of confusion, the devil is smart. The devil observes and can make these conclusions based off of patterns in history and everything, but he can't truly read you. He can predict, and he's damn good at it, based on watching what you've done and everything, but he finds these moments on knowing you, or not knowing you the way God knows you, but knowing you from watching. He knows what would work on you, so to speak. So to that, James, it makes so much sense that if I'm too worried about these crows, then how easy it would be for him or for the devil to send a crow my way that will lead me down the wrong path. You know what I mean? And that's where I think what's really changed the game for me since my accident and since starting Bible study with you guys is that now no matter how loud or clear the signs may seem to be, it doesn't matter to me that I don't know. So I'm not gonna do anything other than say I hear something. So God, just let me know if this is you, and you give me the wisdom that I need to
Right.
get what I need to out of this. And I think
that's all we can do.
And that's the big part right there, is that it's above my pay grade, brother. That's God's job.
Right. Well, it also does say
saying-
like those who seek will find, right?
Mhm.
It says the things that will be hidden will be revealed. And I think that is something that goes hand in hand with a lot of your walk in faith, because there's been things that I've prayed about for years and have been curious about. And like in that sense, I would say, let me just use an example of like other gods being real.
Mhm.
Like I didn't have a good solid answer on that, and I was praying about it for a few years and it bothered me. So obviously there's like confusion there, but at the same time it wasn't like it's tearing me up inside. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, what is that? And it,
Mhm.
like, I prayed about it and was consistent with it. And it took a few years, but now I think I have like a pretty decent answer on it. And I believe that that answer was revealed to me by God because I've been searching and looking and seeking for it. You know what I mean? And that action that of the seeking has to go hand in hand with your faith as well. It's kind of like what we were talking about the other day.
It's a muscle.
It is. Um, so with some of the stuff that we're talking about now, I'm in the same boat as you. Like I'll see a sign, it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Right.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Stop.
Right. So, but ultimately it's like, hey, it's just kind of a gentle reminder to like get close to me. You know what I mean? Or it's like, hey, I'm here with you right now. Remember me. Like it's a reminder. It's like a messenger coming down to be like, hey, it's about me up here, dude. Like stop thinking about yourself or stop thinking about other things going on. It's kind of like
Right.
come closer to me.
Because at the very least, what I've been enjoying with this animal journey, like I remember, like the way that I kind of always had it in my head was that I called it my totem, where I've met. This is like, and this is all what I used to say, you know. So it's not necessarily what I believe now, but it's also not necessarily not. Is that Jake?
Say hi, Jake. Look at this.
Jake.
What up, Jake? How's it feel having a pup around?
Good. It's tiring, but
worth time,
fun.
like worth it.
Huh?
Worth it tiring?
Yeah. I mean, if I wasn't single, I would probably have a dog, but for a single guy, I think it's just too much.
Yeah, that's why cats are.
If I weren't allergic to cats, I would have one.
But anyway, so this totem thing, right, was that I've met 5 of my guides, and it was the lion, the panther, the wolf, the crow, and the orca. And the way that they've always just been so present in my life, and when they show up in the ways that are accidental, so to speak, they're always at moments that are significant. And so whenever I would have dreams about animals, I would always research what the symbolism behind it was. And I was on a huge research thing about the symbolism of animals in different cultures and different religions and different whatever. And the thing is, animals have always had symbols. Like, for example, in Hinduism, I think I could be wrong, but it's a more Indian type of thing. The laws of the jungle that were like in Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book series, not the Disney movie or anything, but the actual books that the movie was based on. They followed a lot of that, like Bagheera the panther, right? The panther isn't the strongest creature in the jungle. That's the tiger, right? But the panther is the sage. The panther is the wise one that teaches. The elephants were revered as like the angels, as the gods, because the idea was that just like in Greek mythology, the Zeus versus his father, that 10-year war was was like the answer to what shaped the valleys and the mountains and everything, because like they're throwing lightning bolts and rocks at each other, and it was like their answer to erosion and that tectonic plate shifting. So in elephants being like the angels and stuff, the idea was that their trunks and their tusk and through their pure size, they were the ones that cleared the jungle and made the paths. You know, they're the architects in a sense, right? And they're revered in so many cultures as all these things. So I started doing all this deep diving in like the different symbolisms of animals and everything. And what I was learning from MJ is when your spirit guides show up, you ask them.
I gotta take Jake out real quick. I think he's gotta use the bathroom.
No, you're all good. Do your thing.
Actually, while he does that, I will be right back. I'm just going to run. Okay, perfect.
Great.
Jake. Hey, look.
Oh,
Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Yeah. They look so similar, don't they? Jake, look. Is that another dog? Is that another dog? Look.
Look at his eyes, man. He's so cute. And then
Yeah, unfortunately, he's getting a little cooped up today. It's been raining all day long, so he hasn't been on a walk.
Well, yeah. So I was starting to ramble, but my point that I was trying to get at is that all the animals that I decided that were on my totem, that were my spirit guides and everything, the way they had presented themselves to me made sense. And when I did all my research in like the different symbolism and cultural significance of these animals, and again, like it made sense. And all the stuff that I was learning from these so-called signs before I started praying for them, there was no gain like though that they talk about with magic and occultism. Not like that. It's just more so like I had a night where a couple years ago I was at work where I overheard these guys, like as I was passing around, they were talking about fishing, and I was talking to MJ about orca whales that day, right? And they were talking about fishing, and then as I passed by them, like at one point, they mentioned that as they looked down, there was a big old orca that was coming up following their fish. That next morning, I woke up to a text from my sister asking me if I wanted to go to SeaWorld with her that day. What's the mascot of SeaWorld but an orca whale, right? And so what happened, I had a beautiful day with my nephew and my sister and things like that, right? So with all of that kind of being like the way that they would operate, I've sort of like changed my feeling about it, and I think it would make more sense to me that those are my like those are the ways that my guardian angels like to come communicate with me at the very least. But again, there's no I don't know for certain, and you know it's just something to pray about. Like you said, it's all we really can do. But
Yeah.
I mean, because you remember what you were saying about MJ too, like your take on it, James, whenever you went to go to the house for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk a little bit more about that?
I do, but I actually wanted to pull up this verse in Revelation first that we were talking about before. Revelation 5, the scroll and the lamb. Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within, and on the back sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom of priests to our God, and they shall reign on earth." It's kind of fascinating that that's how Jesus is portrayed. He actually has 7 horns and 7 eyes, you know?
Yeah, and it appeared as though he was slain. It's really
Right.
interesting. Yeah, and when he mentioned that he sent out like spirits to the earth,
The 7 spirits of God to the earth.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more.
7, 7, and 7. Triple
Yeah.
7. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming because they're saying that the lamb and Jesus is the lamb in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the
Yes.
lamb appeared slain.
Yes. So this is in the end time. So this is Revelation. So this is after he's been killed, like here on earth.
I would like my brain goes to 2 things. Number 1, the lamb being slain or being seen as being slain is a manifestation of the fact that Jesus was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part, and it may go hand in hand with it, is that when Jesus goes into the like into Revelation, like battle mode, if you will, end time. It's that he's no longer physical, like just like that. Like, and so if the lamb is a vessel, it needs to kill so the spirit can be killed physically, so the spirit can be unleashed in a sense. That's the way my brain would interpret it.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because like he says he's like the lion of the tribe of Judah, right? But then it says a lamb shows up. I think it's really interesting because like, I mean, it's talked about, there's songs about like the lion and the lamb. It's in the Bible. He is the lamb, but also in the times of Revelation, when he comes, when those seals are unrolled and stuff like that, he is the lion. He's the warrior in that sense. Right. But he came as the lamb first to save us and get us to repent and find God ourselves and forgive us of our sins. But in the end times, he will come as the lion to conquer the earth, essentially.
Right. Well, so also keep in mind the verse 5 in this. It says, and one of the elders said to me, weep no more. Behold, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, obviously, because Jesus is from David's lineage, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. So before that, he could not open the scroll. So he had to come down first on earth and conquer earth. So when he died, he actually did conquer earth. That's why we're living under this new kingdom in which we have the Holy Spirit living within us and we have forgiveness of sins. So he already at this point has conquered.
Right, but he's conquered sin, right?
He's conquered sin, yeah. And now at this point, now that makes him the only one in heaven worthy to open the scroll.
And wait, and so Jesus is the one they're speaking of, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Son of God who battles the serpent. And he's the only one worthy, specifically the verbiage worthy to open the scroll.
Right.
Correct.
Do you guys catch what that sounds very similar to?
What? No, I'm assuming you're going to say some Greek story.
Norse. So in Norse mythology, Odin.
Oh, yeah, Ragnarok.
Odin has the name the All-Father. And Odin is the king of the gods. He's the king of Asgard. And Midgard is the human realm. I don't remember what realm it was, but the whole idea of Ragnarok is that it's the end times, very similar to Revelations. But just like in Revelations, after the flaming cleanse of the earth, it's the idea that the new Eden is essentially open. Like it has to be burned down to pave way for the new, and like the battle has to happen for. I'm asking this. Is it that like the after end result? Yes, everyone goes back into heaven and everything like that. Isn't it that I don't remember where I get it from? Is it that heaven and earth become one again, or is that Eden is real?
Yeah, they merge essentially, is what it is described in Revelations.
Creates a new heaven and a new earth, and it's combined.
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
Yep.
And
the old heaven will pass away.
It feels like it's like almost like new Eden in a way, you know?
Right. Well, it's kind of like God making things right, and how it's taking Earth back to what he initially had intended it to be in the first place.
Right. So in Ragnarok, I learned this relatively recently, because it's the end time prophecy, right? And the idea is that there's this creature called Fenrir, the great wolf. He's like a wolf that's like bigger than the city, and he's kept in chains, right? When Ragnarok is destined to happen, it's Fenrir has 2 sons, 2 wolves that are meant to chase the sun and the moon and swallow them. And Fenrir battles Odin. Meanwhile, Thor battles Jormungandr, the world serpent. And the whole point of Ragnarok is that Odin and Thor lose the battles, in the sense that Odin is killed by Fenrir and Thor and Jormungandr kill each other. But what I learned recently is that as a result of all of this happening is that it's like a new Midgard. It's a new Earth and a new thing. And like it's sort of like how they talk about, wildfires are deadly, but they're necessary in the sense that they fertilize the soil, you know? And what I find
Yeah, they
interesting is
destroy to make way for new growth.
right. And
Slash burn agriculture.
what I find really interesting about that passage with Jesus as the lamb, he has to go down and do this to be the only one worthy to open the scroll. Well, Jesus battles the serpent, the great dragon, and Jesus is the son of God. Thor, the son of Odin, the Allfather, the only one worthy to pick up the hammer, is the one that battles the giant serpent.
Right.
And
I didn't realize
think
how
Michael
similar
also fights the serpent as well.
Michael does.
Yeah, I think it's Michael, Archangel.
Yeah.
Archangel Michael. Maybe it's not Gabriel. It's Michael. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I think he's the one to actually cast it down, and then Jesus like does it for good.
yeah, like
It finishes
Michael,
the fight essentially.
Yeah.
they go for the double team. Like Mike is the one that gets the that beats down that cracks the shield, and then Jesus comes in with the one shot. Michael only gets the assist, and it's like, can you stop stealing my kills, bro?
Right. Yeah. I just double checked it. It's Michael, the Archangel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I didn't realize how closely related like Norse mythology was to like the story of the Bible.
Well, so
It's really interesting.
all religions, particularly that have the pantheon of the gods in them, have incredible parallels with Christianity.
because
And-
it makes sense when you think about like what the roles of each of those gods in the pantheons were. If you look at Mesopotamian gods, or the pantheon, the Egyptian, the Norse, the Roman, and the Greek, for example, they all have very different methods of operation, but the idea is that they're essentially embodiments of the great forces of nature. You know, like Zeus is the sky, Poseidon is the sea, and Hades is the afterlife and everything. Apollo is the sun, Ra is the sun in Egyptian mythology, like so on and so forth. But they all fulfill those archetypes in a sense. And the way that I've always kind of thought about it is that it just goes to show you that everybody gets it, and all these they're understanding it, but they're just putting their own names to it. You know what I mean? And it makes sense when they're primitive.
Right.
You know that
right. Well,
the
even
sun-
in the Bible too, like if you go back to the ancient religions that like the Gentiles were worshiping and stuff like that, like you have Baal, which also is included in this. Like there's like a pantheon of gods in the Baal story as well, like Moloch and all that kind of stuff. It's the same story that's being retold multiple times. And what's fascinating is that Christianity actually does line up quite well with that storyline. But the only difference is Christianity has God the Father being like, all right, I'm stepping in, like, you know.
it's
like-
it's like that thing you posted, Bryce, where all of these different prophets and everything they say this stuff, but Jesus is the only one that says, "I am the way, the truth."
Yeah. Do you want me to pull it up real quick?
Right.
Please.
And
I would love
God
to-
doesn't deny those other beings being real. He does say that like the idols that they worship are not real, because it's like you're worshiping a piece of wood. Like that
Right.
a piece of wood has no power. Like
when you throw the meat, like when they would like in the Odyssey that's about to come out, right? The story of the Odyssey is the 12 years that happens after the Trojan War in the Iliad. And in the Iliad, one of the big things was that the pantheon was divided in two. Half of the gods supported the Trojans, half of them supported the Greeks. And it's really cool how sometimes they would even drop down into combat. Like there was one moment in like one of the first days of battle in the Trojan War that Ares, god of war, jumps down in the battlefield and starts wrecking shit. And I think it was either one of the Greek hero or Trojan heroes, or it was Athena herself that got a lick on Ares. And I remember it saying, yeah, he was holding his innards and he was running back to Olympus crying like a little bitch, being like, Dad, they did this. And point being is that the reason that the Odysseus, who was one of the heroes on the Greek side, he was the one that brought Achilles to the war and to the battle. And Achilles was the tide changer. And he was the reason that the Greeks won. So it was a very significant decision and an impactful moment. Odysseus's journey back home to Ithaca took 12 years because Poseidon, god of the sea, was on the side of the Trojans. So he cursed Odysseus to not have a peaceful, simple journey back. And Athena, who was on Odysseus' side, she, like, it's Zendaya, I think, who's playing Athena in this. So I'm super excited to see that. And I don't know how accurate to the myth it's going to be, but the point is that they would do this thing before battles and stuff where they would take animals and they would kill them and present their innards to the fire to ask for blessings, right, from these gods. And so, if you will, they would cut out the heart of a deer and they would throw it into the sea to ask for blessings from Poseidon. To that, primitively, it makes sense. You know, the sea is the direct thing. So, of course, you would, like, before they have the knowledge of the architect of it all, the sea itself is something to pray to, if you will. But back to where the difference is with even though they all have the similarities, the difference is that, you know, it's that false idol of sacrificing and killing an innocent animal and throwing it to the sea to ask the sea for safe passage, when all you need to do is pray to God and God will calm the storm if he needs, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, like it goes back to like the spirits too. So like when Jesus was on the water, he rebuked the winds. You don't rebuke something that's not alive, right? Like it's a spirit. And he even says, like, it's in the Bible multiple times over, where it's like there are certain spirits that have domain over certain parts of the earth, and they're living beings and they're very real. What's fascinating though is that some of them are fallen and some of them are not. So like you see this pantheon of gods, they completely fall in line with the fallen angels. Like, I mean, especially if you tie in like the book of Enoch and stuff like that too, like, which obviously there's debate on whether or not that's real or not. But if you dive into that, I mean, it's just pretty much laid out right there for you, where it's like, okay, there are these fallen angels that have gotten away from God's teaching and they taught humanity all this stuff that God never intended for them to know in the first place. And then they started worshiping them. And it's like, God's like, what are you doing? Like, no, they're supposed to be worshiping me, like not you. Like,
Right.
you're supposed to be helping these people, not making them worship you.
Well, so this brings me to a question I've been meaning to ask. Because of the parallels that we're seeing with these different gods and these different religions, like, for example, with the Norse mythology, Odin being like the All-Father, right? He's like the highest god, right? Like the most powerful.
Yeah.
Is it necessarily wrong? Like, are they wrong to be like worshiping Odin because they're still seeing him as the most high god? It's just a different name for him. Like, God in Christianity is Yahweh, right?
Yeah. But Odin is a completely different god than Yahweh. Odin is more the equivalent of like Zeus. Because like in the pantheon,
well, and that's
Greeks,
kind of the same thing. Like with Greek mythology, Zeus is like the most high god. Essentially, he's like the father of the other gods.
He's the one in charge, but he's not the father of the other gods. And there's still a pantheon of gods that have just as much power as he does. He's just kind of the one who's in charge, right? And he may have like a little bit more power than the others, and he commands them, but it's different than like God the Father. God the Father.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, because Hades and Poseidon's like his brother,
right?
But he is father of like Hephaestus and
right, like the lower tier gods.
Yeah, like the lower tier. Yeah.
There is evidence in all of these religious texts, though, of their infallibility. And that, I think, is a key distinction. For example, Asgardians are not immortal the way that Olympians are. Like, Asgardians can be defeated and killed in combat. Like, the fact that Fenrir does kill Odin and Jormungandr, the serpent, does, like, the way that Thor loses the battle, he kills the serpent, but he succumbs to his wounds. in Greek mythology, for example, Zeus, the whole let me do a quick little thing of the Titanomachy, right? So in the beginning,
What is that?
that's the name of the 10-year war between Zeus and his siblings versus the Titans. So
Okay.
to understand that, you got to understand the origins, and that in the beginning there was nothing except for a being that's there were these things called the primordial beings. They were before all of them. The original one was the void, and his name's translated to chaos. And the idea is that eventually he got lonely and bored, so he split himself into 6 parts: the earth, the sky, the water, love, time, and the pit. And so, because and they all had names. Uranus was the sky, Uranus was the sky, Gaia was the earth, Pontus was the water, Kronos was time, not Kronos, the son of or the father of Zeus. Kronos is a different spelling. He's the essence of time. Eros, love, and then Erebos, the pit. So, out of these 6 primordial beings, because the horizon of the sky touched the earth, that's why Uranus and Gaia were wed. The sun or the sky literally touches the earth, so they have children. My teacher explained it as they didn't really have birth control back then, so it was trial and error. The first children that they had were the Cyclops, 3 Cyclops, the 3 giants with one eye. And then it was the Hecaton Curies, the 100-handed ones. These beasts were so ugly and disgusting that Uranus, their father, feared their power and didn't like them, so he throws them into the pit. Now, Gaia, being a mother, did not appreciate that at all. So what she did was that when they had the second set or the third set of children, they were the 6 original Titans, or 6 men and 6 women. And the youngest of the Titans was Kronos, named after Kronos the time. Now, the idea was that of these 6 brothers that they had, Gaia was constantly plotting a way to get her get back on her husband for doing this. So she starts speaking to her sons, and none of them, except for the youngest, was brave enough to enact the plan. So the Titans that were at the 4 corners of the world held down the sky, and Kronos was given the scythe. He used that to cut Uranus up into 1,000 pieces. Because these things can't die traditionally, the best way to kill them, scatter them to the winds, and it will take eons and eons for them to finally reform. Thing was, when Kronos cut down towards the testicles, the blood that came and spilled into the sea created this foam that Aphrodite rose from. So keep that in mind for something like this. So the plan
By the way,
was
just to throw in real quick too, this is also incredibly similar to the story of Baal and his pantheon of gods.
And this is the reason that I'm going into this story, because of what happens with Zeus on this journey. Is me and James ended up discovering this with each other. So basically, the plan was initially, Kronos, you do this, you become king. All I ask for is my children returned to me from the pit. So Kronos does it, and he becomes the king. He takes his sister Rhea as his wife, and he goes back on his deal. He doesn't like his older siblings just as much as his father didn't, because they're stronger than him. And he kept them in the pit. Now, because of the fact that he betrayed Gaia, Gaia cursed him with a prophecy that so as you overthrew your father, so too will your children overthrow you. And so when Rhea started having children, Kronos immediately swallowed them. And she had 5, and Kronos swallowed each one of them. So on that last one, Rhea was pregnant, and she was afraid as all hell for her son's life. So what she did was, when she gave birth, she wrapped a stone in baby clothes and gave that to Kronos, and Kronos swallowed the stone. She took the baby, and Gaia hid him on an island with a bunch of nymphs, and that was Zeus. Zeus was the youngest of the original 6 Olympians, right? And because the Titans were the kings of the Silver Age or whatever, the idea was that they were perfect beings, and when I say perfect, I mean visually, like aesthetically perfect things, and almost like the way that they describe the way angels look when they would present themselves in human form. So on this island, Zeus was raised learning how to use his powers, and Gaia would constantly speak to him and tell him of what happened. Finally, when Zeus was of age, the plan was in motion. He disguised himself as a wine bearer to the Hall of the Titans, and he came up. Him and the nymphs and Gaia created this mixture that he presents it to his father. Father doesn't even know it's Zeus, and he drinks it, and it makes him throw up. Thing is, gods can't be killed. So in Kronos' stomach, all of Zeus's siblings grew up too, and one by one, in reverse order, he threw up all of the siblings: Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia. So the 6 of them dipped. For the next 10 years, the fiercest battle over the earth happened, and that's what forged the physical valleys and the mountains and everything. And it was Mount Othrys versus Mount Olympus. Eventually, the thing was, though, the fighting was kind of at a stalemate. So Zeus goes down into the underworld. He goes down into the pit, and he finds the Cyclopses and the Hecatonchires, and he makes a deal with them. I will free you and from this prison, but you need to help us fight this war. So what did the Cyclops and the Hecatonchires, these amazing forgers, they crafted Zeus's lightning bolt, Hades' helm of darkness, and Poseidon's trident. And they were given these powers and these weapons, because the idea is that Olympians have these superpowers of shapeshifting and controlling things and whatever. They didn't have, like, Zeus wasn't the god of lightning and stuff like that until he became, like, he rose up to that thing. And so now, with the added weapons from the Cyclops and the 100-handed ones being able to throw a lot of extra rocks, eventually the tide turned of the battle, and Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon held down Kronos, and with his own scythe, cut him up, scattered him to the winds. And from there, Zeus honored his debt, and he freed them from their prison. But now they're acting as guards, because they cut him up and threw Kronos into the pit in Tartaros, and the Cyclops and the Hecatonchires were the guards, because Kronos still hated them. But the thing was, now there's this prophecy still underway of Zeus being overthrown by one of his children. So that's kind of what, like, that's like, there's a lot more that comes to it. But then Aphrodite comes into play. Zeus and Hera start having kids, which is, ironically enough, Hera is an anagram of Rhea, her mother. And Zeus starts having children, and they develop the pantheon, and they were then given all of these responsibilities and all of these jobs. So Zeus, being the god of the sky, lightning and everything like that, after the war was over, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, being the brothers, then discuss responsibilities, and they drew lots. And in a lot of the myths, Zeus and Poseidon deceived Hades into being stuck at the underworld. I don't think that's the case. I think Hades is the oldest of his 2 brothers, and Zeus is the youngest. Zeus is the cockiest. He wants the most. Like, if we were to translate that to us, I would be Zeus, Bryce would be Hades, and James would be Poseidon as far as ages go. So just think about that for personalities. Zeus, Brosidon. So Zeus picked the sky as his power, as his dominion. His logic behind it was that the sky encompasses all. You know, there's no escaping the sky. So by being the ruler of the sky, he is the king. Poseidon was like, yeah, go ahead, buddy. You go do your thing. You get power over all. I'll take the sea. Oh, well, that's not a whole lot compared to the sky. No, of course not. But the thing is, there's a lot more animals in the sea than there are in the sky. So Poseidon thought he was getting a one-up on Zeus by, sure, he doesn't have the most expansive territory, but he's got the most fertile, if you will. I think Hades then, knowing as the older brother, he knew that like, because Poseidon and Zeus are always beefing in the stories over power and whatnot. I think Hades is smart enough to he didn't want his pride getting in the way. He took the job that was the most responsibility, and because Hades was never the god of death, he was the lord of the dead, and he was the god of the underworld. And you got to remember, in Greek mythology, the underworld wasn't just hell; the underworld was the afterlife, and he was one of the judges that sat. And when the souls would pass through, they would go to get judgment, and they would be read by the three judges and Hades as what they did. And depending on what they were in life was where they were supposed to go. If they were good and righteous people and actively righteous people, they would be sent to Elysium, which is like heaven.
Where are you going with all this?
I want to know how it ties into Baal.
Well, I might have been getting what I was going with all of this stuff is was that even though like there are all of these like similarities and everything like that, they aren't infallible the way that God is. They're defeatable. They're arrogant. They're a lot more in line with fallen angels. With the Baal thing, when I was talking with James originally about Zeus's origin story, and like before the war, James was telling me that that's kind of really similar to what Baal went through.
James, can you elaborate?
Yeah, it totally is. I'm not going to be able to go into nearly as much detail as Travis went into there with the Baal story, but
I love Greek mythology. I'm sorry.
Summed up. So I know you were going there. I was like,
God.
wait. I got to reel this back in. I'm like, where are you going, dude?
I don't know, but I'm already there.
No, but essentially Baal is almost like the exact same story as what he just said, with like slight differences, different names, slightly different things, but ultimately the same essence happen where there is a war where Baal goes to battle another god who's kind of like beefing with him, who has domain. And in this story, there also is a god named El, who just sits on the corner of the universe. So like he like created it, and he's just like, all right, you go out and do your thing. And so there's this pantheon of gods, and Baal is a part of that pantheon. And there's like a dispute of who can be the leader. And Baal actually goes to El, sitting on the corner of the earth, and been like, I want to control this. And he's like, all right, go for it. But like it's like a big duke thing. Like so they go and they duke it out with another high-powered god, essentially like the essence of Zeus battling Kronos, right? It can be equated to that. And then he gets domain. Ultimately, he wins. He gets domain over the sky, and he becomes the god of like the sky and like fertility and like wealth and all this stuff, which is pretty much the same thing as Zeus. So it's just similar in the aspects that there's a pantheon, there's a duking it out over power to who has ultimate domain. They're both the god of the sky, and like wealth and power.
And the fact that like Zeus and Baal weren't born the gods of the sky.
Right.
They became that. They rose up, or they took it, and it was like, and I think what's interesting is that the fact that as these beings were born across all of these things that they had dominion over were all there already, and they became the rulers of them, you know. So the question, I guess, goes to, well, where did they come from? You know what I mean? And I think what's really interesting about all of these similarities, like even with Buddhism and reincarnation, that's pretty like it's really similar to like the idea of the resurrection and everything like that, just with like a different idea behind it. And they're all arguing over semantics, and they're all hitting pretty much the same dial. And I think what's interesting about Christianity is that what it does differently than a lot of other ones is that it doesn't say, no, it's not, it's me. It says, yeah, but, you know.
Right.
So that,
it takes it a step further.
Do you have that quote still pulled up, Bryce? I know we got a little distracted.
Yeah, it's okay. I wanted to actually, now that you brought Buddhism, so it says, before these figures died, These are the things that they said. Muhammad said, "I don't know the purpose of life." Buddha said, "Seek for the truth." Confucius said, "I am not the way." But Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So it's just really interesting that a lot of these like prophets essentially in these other religions all claim they're like, I don't really know what's going on. And Jesus says, no, like I am the way to the Father. Like he's the only figure who said, like, you need to listen to me. You need to follow me. And the other ones, like, yeah, they may have given some general ideas for how to live, but at the end of their life, they even admitted, like, they're like, I don't really know. You know what I mean?
Well, the fascinating thing too is in him doing that, it's taking us away from our self uh like obsession essentially. So if you look at like Buddhism or Hinduism or New Age or whatever, like all those different religions are more so about the self. Like with Buddhism, you're trying to achieve nirvana, right? And it's a self-centered thing. And yes, in order to do that, you need to do good to others, but you're doing it out of self-motivation, not for the love of somebody, right?
Right.
And then you go to like like Islam or something like that, and in that case you're doing it because it's a command from God, and you're like scared of God essentially. Like,
Mm.
so like you better go do that or else there's going to be some consequences, you know what I mean? And Christianity is the first one that's like, it's not about you. I want you to do all this stuff so you can love me and love others better. And Jesus, by being the one to be like, it's about me, thus lends ourselves towards getting out of ourselves, because now the focus is on him. It's on something else, not within ourselves.
Something greater than us. Yeah.
Right. And that's the only religion that actually does that and gets you out of your self-centeredness, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it is definitely.
And if you look at this pantheon of gods, in any history of origin, they're all fighting with each other all the time. They're all in disagreement quite often. They squabble amongst themselves. And then,
Very bloody.
huh?
Very bloody.
Yes. And if you go straight to the Bible, you don't even need Enoch for it. We know angels were coming down and talking to humans because it talks about the Nephilim in the Bible
Mm-hmm.
and says that the angels came down and mated with humans
And and animals.
and animals. Yeah. And out of that came all these like crazy things. And it says that the men of renown, the dog's growling, it created like the men of old, men of renown. And when it's saying that, it's already in the Old Testament in like the ancient times. So you're telling me there's time before the ancient times that we don't know about that are men of old and men of renowned, you know? So that's kind of fascinating. So it's like, all right, if they were coming down in physical form mating with humanity, they obviously have more power and ambition and know way more than we do. Of course,
Right.
that's going to look like gods. And if they're fallen and don't want them to worship gods and they want to be worshiped themselves, which is exactly what the Bible tells us is what they want, how does that look in human form? Oh, wow, it looks like gods who want us to worship them, even though they're imperfect and they fight amongst each other and they can't agree. And there's even power struggles amongst themselves, you know?
Right. And it makes sense because, like, and with the story that you're explaining, Travis, the other gods like, hated each other. They hated their fathers. You know, like they rose against their fathers.
Yeah.
Jesus is the only one who loves his father, wants to
Right.
be with him, and carries out his word.
And
You
the
know what I
angels who fell turned against their father, God.
There's
Right.
there's a lot of moments of solidarity, like even in the Iliad, but to your point, like even in the Iliad, the Trojan War, there was a whole section where there was a moment where Hera, the wife of Zeus, happened to be on opposite sides of him in supporting the Trojan War, right? Zeus was doing the thing where he was like, look, like this is a human affair. We leave it at that. And so the gods would like sneak down, and like they were sneaky about the way that they would, violate that law. There was a section I even remembered. Like the reason that a lot of Zeus's demigod children were struggling a lot in their lives was because Hera was a very vengeful wife. She hated the fact that Zeus cheated on her all the time. But what ends up happening is that in the Trojan War, Hera comes down to Poseidon's realm to discuss in secret about their plans against Zeus. And what do? They like I remember
You do the
being
dirty.
oh yeah, and there's even like a thing where there was a one myth where Hephaestus was recruited by a couple of others to alter Zeus's throne to trap him so that they could get one over on him. So they're constantly beefing, and like the gods in Greek times are vengeful and wrathful as hell. Like the story of Perseus when he uses Medusa's head to put the that sea monster to stone. That in Clash of the Titans they call it the Kraken. It was called Cetus instead, but it was Princess Andromeda who was chained up to be sacrificed by this sea beast like this. James, she was chained up like this.
You mean like this?
Really? It was like this?
Well, it was either this or this, but either way, and
Like this.
And the reason why she was sent to be sacrificed, it wasn't even Andromeda's fault. It was her mother, the queen, who on like Andromeda's 18th birthday or whatever, started boasting about how she's even more beautiful than Aphrodite herself. And so the gods were like, you don't do that. And so now we're sending a sea monster that's going to kill the entire city, or put your daughter up who didn't do anything other than just her mom was hyping her up and she was sent to be sacrificed. Very, very vengeful, wrathful stuff. And
Yeah, and that's interesting too because we actually talked about this in church a couple of weeks ago. It was the story of was it Abraham who had to sacrifice his son? God told him to sacrifice his son. A lot of other gods, and like during those old times when they were worshiping other gods, those gods wanted like human sacrifices.
Yep.
And it was a regular thing. Like kids were sacrificed pretty often. Like, and of course, thinking that today it's like an awful thing, but back then it was normal. And God, I think, made it a point to have Abraham.
That was worshiping to Moloch, by the way.
Moloch. Okay.
Moloch is the one that they would.
Well, and it's probably other gods as well, based on the region that you're in, right?
Right.
Like
at least in the Bible,
but essentially,
that was the one that was going on.
Right. So, but God made it a point to say, like, hey, listen, I'm glad that you feared me enough to do this, but you don't need to sacrifice your kids to me. Like, and I just think that's a beautiful thing. Like, our God is so much better than what you hear about it and these other gods and stuff like that. Go ahead.
I'm curious about something. If you guys can explain it better. I remember the Abraham story as he was asked by God to sacrifice his son, and when he was about to do it, that's whenever God told him not to.
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
So, was it just supposed to be a test of faith?
Yeah, I think it was a couple different things. I think it was a test of faith. And God says that he's like, or he sends an angel to tell him, like, I truly know that you actually fear me now because you're willing to sacrifice your own blood for me. Like, you truly do fear me. I think it was also a message to generations down the line of like, that's not the kind of God that I am. Like, I'm not going to make you sacrifice your own flesh and blood to me.
Right. He was also establishing his covenant. So like Abraham is called the father of nations, right? So like Noah, or sorry, not Noah, Adam doesn't really get called that often. It's, you know, the Abrahamic religions. It's
Yeah,
you know, like
that's what
he's
I've
the
heard.
father. So what's kind of interesting, and he comes after Adam, right? But what's fascinating about it is when God came down and was putting Abraham through the ringer, what he was doing he was also establishing his bloodline that Jesus was going to come from. So God's like, you're going to be the father of these people. You're going to be like the first, essentially, where I'm establishing my bloodline. And through Abraham, you go all the way from Abraham all the way to the very end of the Bible through Jesus. It's the Abrahamic bloodline. So you're following his lineage. So David also comes from the line of Abraham. Uh, Joseph comes from the line of Abraham. Jacob comes from the line of Abraham. Like, it's just one by one by one. So he was establishing a faithfulness within Abraham to establish his own bloodline, and that faithfulness wasn't necessarily to like I'm trying to figure out the right words. But ultimately, he just wanted someone who would listen to him and be faithful no matter what he told them, because that is the bloodline that was pure enough for what his
plan was.
His plan was,
Like,
right?
Yeah.
Sort of like, I would never make you do this, but they don't have to know that I wouldn't do that at first.
Right.
Right.
And especially just to establish his bloodline, like God himself's bloodline. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because God ultimately decided to birth himself out of that lineage.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing, because again, to this Greek god, for example, thing, like I was saying that they're very vengeful and wrathful and whatnot. I figured out a better word to describe it. They're very human. You know, they're very
Yeah.
they're jealous. They're proud. They're arrogant. They're like you know what I mean? Like, and
It is interesting too, because like when you think of angels, they're like you talked about their messengers, but we also see them as like servants of God, like the angels that serve God in heaven and stuff like that. Yet these other gods that we're talking about are very human. It's just interesting, like you realize that God gave them all free will as well. Like these angels aren't just servants because that's what God told them to be. They're doing it because he still gave them free will. That's why a third of the angels fell as well, right? They stood against God because they had free will.
Yep.
Right. So I don't know. I just thought that was just really interesting to think about.
I actually want to bring up whenever Father Gabriel talks about Satan and the fallen angels, because
Okay.
you remember a conversation you and I had a while back when we were talking about Lucifer in particular, how I was kind of saying that it feels like it's not fair to create someone destined to become evil like this. And I have the idealistic hope that the true, like at the end of times and everything like that, that I'd love to think that Lucifer comes home and, you know, repents in a way, and that's like, that'd be a beautiful thing, to kill evil by evil destroying itself or whatever. But James was saying that you got to be careful with that line of thought, because that's, you know, that's a very dangerous road to go down, you know, by having sympathy for the devil or this and that. And this passage kind of helped me come to an understanding, right? So he says, let us now delve deeply into the topic of evil spirits, the identity of Satan and his followers, the demons, and let us proceed in an orderly manner. That part cracks me up. God, in his infinite power, created multitudes of angels, an impressive, incalculable number. Psalm 146 says that God knows the stars one by one and calls them by name. The same thing can be said of the angels. God knows them one by one. One day, during an exorcism, Father Candido Amontini, a Passionist priest and my great teacher, asked a demon, "How many are you?" And the demon responded, "We are so many that if we were visible, we would obscure the sun." The demon on that occasion gave information that we have no reason to disbelieve because it's confirmed in the Bible. God created the angels as extremely intelligent beings with knowledge immensely superior to man's, and he predestined them to paradise, to eternal beatitude. Paradise, then, is not a passive and static contemplation of God. God himself created everything in movement, both visible things, for example, the stars, and invisible things. Now, this is the part that really opened my eyes to stuff. A great number of the angels fell because they rebelled against God. We recall that before admitting the angels to paradise, God subjected them to a trial of obedience and humility, of which we know the nature, but not the specifics. The sin of the fallen angels was one of pride and disobedience. Satan, the most beautiful of all of the angels, being aware of his extreme intelligence, rebelled at the idea of being subjected to someone. He forgot that he was a creature made by God. Many angels followed him in his folly of omnipotence and never turned back from their choice. The thing that he was saying, though, where unlike the demons, the angelic creatures were humble, and therefore a choice opened up to them, the joyful and eternal beatific vision of God the Creator. They chose to remain faithful to the nature and goal of their existence, that of praising God eternally, doing a simple and at the same time difficult thing, being humble and therefore free from pride. They accepted submission to God, that is, fidelity to their Creator and to his plan. In this way, the angels fully embraced their nature and their end. It was a sign of faithfulness to the truth that they, like us, were created by God to love him forever. This attitude does not humiliate them at all because it does not imply a lack of something in any way, and rather, to the contrary, a fullness. The angels have continued to be faithful to their nature, which refers them directly to God, the one who has written in creation the best laws for them, thought of for their own good. And he talks about the idea that I'm trying to find, yeah, okay, here it is. Their new condition, the fallen angels, recognized by the Bible as infernal, implied that the devils were forever excluded from paradise, from the vision of God, and from eternal happiness, which originally was their only goal. Therefore, it is a truth of faith that the demons are definitively condemned, that is, damned. For them, there is absolutely no possibility of salvation because their arrogant choice is unchangeable. That was the part I had a hard time accepting for a while, that why would he create them just to be evil, right? Well, why are they permanently and forever damned with no chance of saving? It's because of their intelligence, which in pure spirits is greatly superior to ours. And because, unlike us men, they already enjoyed a full vision of God. They've already had what we hope as Christians to find and in death. And because, unlike us men, they already enjoyed a full vision of God, they made their choice in a complete state of awareness, and it cannot be withdrawn. On the other hand, the demons would not wish to go back, right? And so the idea of because they're perfect, they made their decision knowing what all of it is for, and they still said no. You know,
Right.
and
And that makes sense. Yeah.
that's the part that finally really made me understand like why that evil part of it is there. And it's not I don't consider it a failure from God at all, or what I used to think of was like something that I would question and be like, well, why did you do that? You know, but it makes sense because
Give me a second, guys. Okay.
you're good. It makes sense to me that the bright one, the greatest and the most beautiful and the like from what I've been reading and understanding, Lucifer was sort of like the chosen one. He was the morning star. He was the one that was meant to be like the prince. But because they're so smart and perfect that if they were to make this decision, that's different from coming from a place of ignorance like a human would do. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And it said that like they made that choice. So which ultimately is like what we have here on earth, right? We have the choice to accept God into our hearts and be with him, or we have the choice of rejecting him and being apart from him. So we have the same choice that the demons had, or they were, when they were originally angels. We have that same choice, and if we want to be with them, we can be with them.
Yeah,
But you just have to accept them into your heart.
and it's kind of like what James was saying about that that one podcast or something you were listening to where the guy was saying that God is his best friend and he heard a voice being like, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh."
Yeah, that was the
That
deep
shook
end
him
with
up
Taylor
enough.
Welsh. Yeah. It's a good podcast, by the way.
Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, that
Who, me?
please.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's called The Deep End with Taylor Welsh. So you should just watch that. They had some pretty crazy guests on there sometimes. They really dive into the deep end, like literally.
Okay.
So it's stuff that like they're not talking about like a lot of like normal biblical stuff, like the kind of the surface level stuff that, if you're getting into Christianity, you should probably listen to, but more so rather the kind of out there stuff, kind of what we're talking about today, right? Like
Okay.
Nephilim and angels and spiritual realm and the pantheon of gods, stuff like exactly like what we're talking about today. But he was saying, he was like praying and like God is calling us to be friends with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was praying and he was like, yeah, we're friends, right? And then God was like, we're not friends. He was like, what? What do you mean? He's like, we don't hang out. It's like, you don't just come and hang out with me. He's like, when was the last time you just hung out with me? It's like, we're not friends. Friends hang out. And he was like, oh crap. He's like, he's right. So I thought that was kind of fascinating because it's like, how often do you just like hang out with God? And I've been trying to make it a point just to like hang out with Jesus, like going about your day. It's like having your friend there with you. And that's essentially kind of the idea of it. Right.
Yeah.
I think that presents an interesting idea that I was thinking about how
I'm gonna go check on this dog. I left the door open and I don't know if he'll stress me out. Finally stopped raining for like 2 seconds. And he still hasn't pooped.
but I think it brings up an interesting line of thought that one of the earlier Bible studies I was a part of that we were talking about, like I had come to the understand to an acceptance of it, but just for the sake of conversation, I wanted to bring it up when we were talking about it that night. But like the idea of how can you put terms and conditions on unconditional love? And when we talked about it, it was like, well, I mean, for one, who said it was unconditional? You know, and it's not like he's terms and conditioning it as in, hey, look, like you have to say 7 prayers a day, otherwise you don't get eternal paradise and you're going to burn in hell. It's more so it's like, well, why would if I'm offering all of this amazing stuff, you just have to love me and accept and know me, like literally know me.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense as to it's like remember when we were on the phone with Devin that night and he was asking that question and he just kind of wasn't really hearing our answer.
Yeah, he wasn't like accepting our answer as our answer.
Because it's just like he was asking like the same question 5 times and we would give him the same answer, but
Right.
that question was where it's like, okay, so because he never knew all of this stuff, he deserves to burn. And it's like, well, you're oversimplifying it, you know?
Right.
And I tried to explain it to him. Like, I felt bad that, like, I remember whenever you were like, all right, boys, I'm going to bed. I was like, I don't blame you. Cause like, it's like, he's the one that called you up. And I'm just like, if you're not going to like listen, I mean, I don't blame Price for not sticking around. But the way I tried to explain it to him was that if you look at it on like a map, right? Like when you're dead, you have in front of you this white light. And it's like one of those lights that you have to get closer to see the light adjust into the heaven, right?
Right.
And God's there at the gate, so to speak. And if you turn around and walk away from the light, and the light is here, don't be surprised if you find darkness when you walk away from the light,
Right.
you know? And to and so in that context, like, well, yeah, I guess you could say that you do deserve to find the absence of God if you walk away from God. I'm not saying you deserve to burn for having doubt. You know what I mean?
You talking about
Right.
that conversation you had with Devin?
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
the way I'm bringing it up into the friend thing is because I always kind of struggle with the idea of how can you put terms and conditions on unconditional love, but I feel like that's an oversimplification of it, you know, where it's like it's not so much that you deserve to burn for having doubt, but like if like this map in the center of the map is light and it's the kingdom of heaven, and you walk away from it, don't be surprised that you find darkness and absence of God.
Right.
Yeah,
know?
there's a the show that I've been watching, Demon Slayer. You guys gotta watch it. It's a really good anime show. But there's this really interesting scene that happened. So I'll just give a quick sum up of like what goes on in the show. There's demons, and then there's like the Demon Slayer core, which are humans who go out and kill demons, right? But the idea is that the humans get turned into demons, and they can't really control themselves anymore, and like this demonic like presence overcomes them and transforms them into the demon. So when they get killed, they actually start like reverting back into their human mind, and they remember what life was like before they were a demon. And then it kind
Mm.
of like always shows like a glimpse of them like going into the afterlife. And like it's fascinating because with some demons like that are killed, it's showing like the goodness of the human that was actually there before they were infected with the demon disease, essentially. And this one I thought was really fascinating. It was a brother and a sister, and when he remembered his humanity, he was so filled with hate, even before he was a demon. And when he was getting passed into the afterlife, his sister was not a bad person, and she was going at the same time. And instead of like just the light showing up or the darkness showing up, it was split, and the sister was standing on the side of the light, and the guy was standing on the side like the darkness. And the sister was begging him to come with her, and he was like, I don't deserve it. I can't go there. That place is not for me. Even though all he had to do was walk across the line. That's all he had to do and accept it. And his sister was so upset, and she's like, I'll follow you wherever you go because I've been with you forever. And then she gets on his back and like climbs on his back. And then he like has this flashback of like all of this life that he spent with his sister, and he still loved his sister, but he hated so much, and he never loved in his life, that he chose and walked into the darkness, leaving the light behind. It was this very impactful moment, and I think that's more kind of the reality of what's actually going on here.
Mm.
Mhm.
Is you're actually choosing to turn your back on the light. So
Right.
it's like, do they deserve that? It's like, well, I mean, they
A
chose
good
it.
a good metaphor is, does somebody deserve to be eaten alive by sharks? No, but if they jump into 40-foot water with no boat, a life preserver, and a suit full of chum, you're gonna get what's coming to you. You're asking for it at that point. Right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up this like unconditional love thing because even though like God loves all of us and he loves all of his creations, right? I do still believe that it is unconditional love. And I like how you put it. Like it seems like it's unconditional, but with terms and conditions. Like that doesn't really make sense. But it's not that he has terms and conditions. It's just the fact that he loves us enough for us to make our own choice and respect our choice. Right.
Mhm.
So to me, it's still unconditional love because he's like, I love you. I want to be with you. But if you truly make the decision to not want to be with me, then I understand. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like,
Absolutely. And because that kind of goes into this conversation James and I have had. And I don't know if you've been present for it, Bryce. I think so, but um I I don't remember what exactly we were talking about, but it was the concept of hell as it's still not an end game. Hell is like an even deeper trial. And the idea that
That's my
it
hope. I really,
yeah,
there's not much evidence of that, but that's kind of just what I want to be true, you know?
because like if God really wanted to, he could pull anybody out of there, right?
Yeah.
yeah, you would think, right?
Right. And so I think and it came from a I was just like early days of smoking weed. I was hanging out with Mick and she was watching this show called Once Upon a Time where it's about like modern day fairy tale creatures in like modern society who had forgotten that they were from like all these books. And it was like the middle of the show. I was just kind of going along for the ride, but like Captain Hook, Rumpelstiltskin, Snow White, and Prince Charming were all going into Hades, into hell. And it was like as in Hercules is Hades, right? But it was like real hell. And I was really high, so I was kind of freaking out looking at it, like the colors, the stone, and everything, and it because it felt real. And imagining like being in there was just kind of freaking me out. But the thing was, just like they do in Greek mythology, they had found a boat to take them into a hidden river that took them into the underworld. So they weren't cast into hell by dying. They found an entrance and they were going to grab somebody and get them out of there or something like that. And in just my high brain, I was just thinking about like the eternal torture and this and that and being in the pit. And something about the way that they had done it had me think like in the show made me think about like realizing that you could like it would be really difficult, like really, really hard. But if demons truly don't have power over God, like you could eventually find the escape hole. And it's wishful thinking, like, just the idea that, yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to believe that even at the worst of it, you could still you could still be saved. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
to
Right.
simplify it as in it's just either you love me or you burn, that's just, I feel like willfully ignorant at that point.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it ties into the whole "I'm not your friend" thing, in the sense that there's no less like I'm sure he had no less love for this person who was saying that. You know what I mean? Like he still loves them unconditionally as he was made and everything. But the reality is, it's like, dude, I mean, we're not friends though. I can still like I can love with my whole heart a person that I pass by on the street or like one of my guests at one of my tables. But we're not friends, like I'm taking care of you, I'm serving you, and I love you in the sense that you are a fellow human and you are under my care at this point. So,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that we're friends and I'm not going to testify for you in court because I don't know you. You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't make my love any less true. But that's just the reality. If you don't have a relationship with him on a personal level, you can't really call him your friend. He wants to be, but it's not that simple, you know?
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I had to put him on a leash. He's acted up. He just kept for like the last like 20 minutes, he's just been in the background. It's been really frustrating.
So I actually had an idea the last Bible study that I wanted to run by you guys.
Okay.
You know how a lot of YouTubers have reaction videos to like, and they're like those long 45-minute ones and they're watching a movie? And I was thinking what might be a really cool idea is if we filmed like a Discord chat or a StreamYard watch party and we watched Prince of Egypt together.
Mm.
Oh, the animated one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched that in forever, dude.
Dude, when was the last time you watched it? Can you remember like probably around how old you were?
I was in college. Yeah.
Okay. So still like an adult, not just like watching it when you were a little kid.
I watched it when I was a little kid, and then I rewatched it once in college because I had a buddy when I was in the band that was like obsessed with the soundtrack of it. And it does have a really good soundtrack. So
Yeah. Bryce, have you ever seen Prince of Egypt?
No, I don't believe so.
So it's an old school DreamWorks animated movie about the story of Moses. And
Okay.
it's a rarity that so many people who aren't faithful Christian or anything, like they're all like, this is a really powerful movie. And like it's something wild. My mom made me watch it and I hated watching it when I was a little kid, but I watched a random scene from it within the last like year or two, and I got emotional as hell watching it, dude. It's it's heavy, and it doesn't pull any punches either.
Huh.
Like there's when it does the sequence with the burning bush, for example, and Moses hears the voice of God. They do this trick where they had like 15 different people on the crew record the lines and they play them all at the same time.
Mm.
It's as if there's no real voice. And it sounds like when God speaks, he's got a million different voices. But when there was a moment where God makes the bush burn a little bit brighter and like a gust of wind happens and Moses does this. And when he does that, it's one voice that starts to get a little bit louder. And then when it quiets back down, it's just back to like kind of like a big group of voices and stuff like that. And it's credited as being very, very accurate to the biblical text. I think that'd be a really fun idea for us to watch it, record it and talk about it and react to it.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing like reaction videos and stuff like that. So we definitely should.
I will say I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and I still want to do it in a sense, but I think YouTube has enough Christian reactor
Reactions
channels out there right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, and I actually watch quite a few of them too. So, and it's getting pretty toxic out there right now. So like even like Ruslan, like one of my favorite guys to watch, he now has a guy like after him. And he made a channel solely to hate on Ruslan. And it turns out this guy is a pastor who's also a leader of a cult.
Really?
And yeah, like he was on they had him on a podcast recently where like they actually talked to each other, and like they had two other people there, and like this guy is just like a little unhinged, and he's like coming after Ruslan and just everything that he's saying, and just very toxic place,
Well, I've noticed too, like I haven't really started watching any of like the big Christian podcast YouTubers or anything like that, because I feel like I've been seeing like so much, like they're making so much content that is like kind of like hateful to a degree. Like they're like calling out people and being like,
yeah,
oh yeah, you shouldn't be doing this, or this is where they messed up, or you know what I mean?
right,
And it seems like it's a lot more of like clickbaity now just to get more
yes,
views.
totally,
Like I think that the best thing for us to do is to focus on the things that matter. Focus on God, reading
I
the
agree.
word and stuff like that. I
That's why
don't
I'm
mind
excited.
reaction videos, but I don't want to watch like other YouTubers and do a reaction video that way. Like I'd rather do a reaction video of us like watching like a documentary or like watching The Chosen or
Totally
like
agree.
something like that, more to a degree where we can rejoice in the cool things that we find out about God and about Jesus,
I
and
totally
not
agree.
spreading the hate that seems to be plaguing YouTube. You know
I
what I mean?
100% agree. I was also thinking like in regards to this camping trip that we're gonna do. I actually was talking to Travis about this the other day. I don't know if you guys have caught up on it, but Travis
Nope.
was like, dude, what if we started like filming for the weekend and that we do the camping trip, just like easy kind of vlog style. I'm like, well, it's interesting you say that because me and Bryce were already planning on doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
He's like,
Yeah,
seriously, that's
we're
it?
gonna have
Like,
a Bible study one night. I'd like to do
Yeah.
that.
and
So-
then
so-
I think moving forward too, that kind of content I think would be really, really good for us to make because it's showing us live it out in real time, like
Mhm.
the teachings, and it's kind of showing how we're utilizing it, and it's showing us
Mhm.
how to be together as a group and living the lifestyle. So it's like now we're getting the learning, now we're getting the living, and we're applying it as
Like
well.
practical application. Yeah. So
Yep.
like it was funny because the that night at work where I was having the bad day, I talked to James, had the crow, the 311s, and the 777, and I was doing that prayer. One thing that I didn't mention to you yet, Prezi B, was that one of my best homies at Pinstripes, Manny, the one that kind of reminds me a lot of Nathan. So him and his lady share a vehicle, and uh, so sometimes, like when we get off at the same time, we'll be just chilling in the parking lot waiting for her to come swoop him or whatever. And he comes down because him and my girl Natalie were working an event upstairs. I was in bowling downstairs, and I was finishing up my closing stuff, and they were coming down and finishing up too. They were just chilling for a little bit. I thought they were just decompressing, but I had one more thing to do, and I was done. It took like 2 minutes. I went to go clock out, and Manny asks me, and it's funny. I was having weird thoughts about my friendship with Manny that are definitely not real thoughts, like insecure, the devil talking type of thing, and where like I was being insecure about our friendship and everything over nothing, right? Well, he comes down and he goes, "Hey, man, would you be willing to give me a ride home?" And he lives like 10 minutes away. It's kind of on the way, and he's a good friend. So I'm like, dude, you don't even have to ask. Like, all you got to do is ask. Of course, I got you. So we're driving back to his place, and this is like our first time having like some one-on-one time in a minute. So we're catching up. He's on a real estate journey, just like James is. And so I'm asking him about this. He's asking me about life. We end up getting into like a 30-minute conversation in his driveway about life and this and that. And he starts asking me some questions about my acting career that had me really taking a look at myself. You know what I mean? And he said, I'm telling you this, but it's just me saying this out loud because I need to do this too. And we have this conversation about stuff. And one of the things he was saying was like, dude, if you're having struggles with this and that, just film everything and document everything. Document the process. Like just have a camera rolling while you're doing it. Eventually, we'll get the footage and be able to edit something together to create. So I was thinking, what if we just like what if I just bring my tripod just as something to like hold the camera steady? We just hit record and just see what happens. Just eventually like I'll bring it home and I'll have something. And
Right.
so I think that's an awesome idea. As
Absolutely.
far as, as far as the Prince of Egypt thing goes, I was thinking that would be something fun to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a podcast thing or like a way to change up what we're doing for what you guys are doing for the Bible Bros, but more so just something different style of content. Instead of us just
Mhm.
reading and talking, we watch something that has to do with the subject, and it's entertaining, and we just make sure to have the video rolling while we're watching it and talking about it in case we strike gold.
Right.
And
Right. No, I do like that idea a lot. And I like that idea better than doing like watching other Christian YouTubers and reacting to that just because, we're going to be, that's doing the same thing that everybody else is doing.
Right.
Let's break the mold and do something that I think is more worthy of God, not hating on other people.
would you
Yep.
would you real quick, because I have it pulled up, would you be down to let me share my screen real quick for this burning bush scene from the movie?
I don't mind at all.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Sick. Because it's cool because this one has biblical subtitles going on too, like, and it's showing the moments in the conversation that they're having where they got it from for the script in the text, just to show how accurate the movie is. It's not just an animated movie about, and they happen to have the same name. So share screen.
Oh, it's super laggy. Oh, there it goes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is about like almost halfway through the movie.
Yeah, it's still super laggy.
Yeah. At moments. It's all right.
Here I am. Take the sandals from your feet. For the place on which you stand is holy ground. Who are you? I am that I am. I don't understand. I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
You were born of my mother from heaven. You are our God.
What do you want with me? I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt and have heard their cry.
Stop it! I'm getting goosebumps.
So I have come down to deliver them out of slavery and bring them to a good land. A land flowing with milk and honey. And so unto Pharaoh I shall send you. Me? Who am I to lead these people? They'll never believe me. They won't even listen. I shall teach you what to say. Let my people go! But I was their enemy. I was the prince of Egypt, the son of the man who slaughtered their children. You've chosen the wrong messenger. How can I even speak to these people?
Who made man's power? Who made the deaf, the mute, the seeing, or the blind? Did not I? Now go!
Moses, I shall be with you when you go to the king of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not listen. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders. Take the staff in your hand, Moses. With it, you shall do my wonders. I shall be with you, Moses. Moses.
Ugh.
Got goosebumps. A little emotional almost.
Yeah.
I'm saying, man, like, who, like that whole movie, dude, is insane. Like, there's a part where when he first comes back to Egypt after that, his whole demeanor is just different. And because you remember the Pharaoh was his brother, his like adopted brother, and he basically, when he comes in, he tries to say, you know, what God told him to say, and he takes the staff and it turns into a serpent and back into a staff, and he's like, behold the power of God. And it's one of the coolest songs in the movie where his two like the Pharaoh's two like spiritual advisors start doing all these tricks and all these magic tricks and everything that are all very much like a real magic trick where it's just sleight of hand and fireworks and everything, playing with the big boys now, and they're doing all this scary stuff and they're getting closer with the snakes and all this and that, and Moses just looks at them like, bruh. I think that'd be a really fun movie for us to watch together now that we're all
Yeah.
kind of on this journey.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just read through Exodus too, so it's fresh.
Yeah, that's true. And it's really fascinating, like having read it and then seeing that come to life in an animation like that. It's really cool.
Mhm.
Yeah. Could you hear, I know it was a little laggy, but could you hear that there was like the
See,
main voice, but then there
yeah,
would be
that
like whispers and echoes underneath?
right. Yeah. The audio was pretty clear for the most part. It was just the video that was lagging a little bit. So, but yeah, it was really cool.
Speaking of cool, I did want to say something that I haven't said before, but a little while back, a couple years ago, I remember when James first told me that, Bryce, you were having lunch with him and you said that you convert to Christianity and you wanted to take the leap. And I'm not gonna lie, I was happy for you, of course, but once you guys really started diving into it, there was a part of me that felt, I don't want to say scared, but it wasn't necessarily a positive emotion that it would like get to a point where we would all convert together. And because the thing was, I was still kind of like on this path of that. I don't like labels and I don't like the identity politics that come from calling yourself Christian, this and that. And I didn't think you needed the title to do these good things and whatever. And it was honestly, it was denying myself that the full surrender, and that it's not just, you call yourself a Christian so you can do this and that. It's that it's taking the mantle of, like, it's not just saying, oh yeah, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. It's like accepting him as the way, the truth, and the life. And there was like one day we were all up at your place in the basement, and we were all drinking, partying and everything. And this was when I first came up to visit, whenever I had just broken up with Lexi and I was not in a very good place. And you guys know how I was whenever I would be drinking and stuff too. And when you were talking to all of us about what's happened for you since you've committed your life to God, there was a part of me that was kind of disinterested in the conversation. And I don't at all mean it in a way of disbelieving or not being happy for you, but it's kind of like what I was trying to help defend Devin with that one day, where it's just the talking of it. It's just there was something that was blocking me, and I just there, and in a way, I was afraid that this would happen, and I think a lot of it came from a bit of a selfish sense of shame that it was more so like, because of the way that I was raised in Catholic church, Catholic school, and everything, I felt like there was a level of me not needing to do all of this song and dance and everything to be able to be on the same wavelength as you guys and be of the same standing as you two. And because you two really are, you're my best friends and you're my brothers. So your opinion, your guys' relationship with me, everything, that all matters a lot to me, more so than a lot of like little things in life. And I I just find it really funny how this came about, and in a not so pleasant way due to my accident. But I just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge that, like, I've been referring to myself as Christian lately, and I've never really done that before. And it just feels really, really cool that we're all here, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. I
That video just made me a little emotional, and I feel like I'm getting emotional now. Whew, but I don't mean to. But, you know, it's like, look at us, the three Jedi, the three lions. Here we are.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something too. It's crazy. I was thinking about that earlier because when I first met the two of you, neither of you were Christian. My only like Christian friend that like I was close to was like Vance, and Nathan also was not a Christian. So it was like I was my best friends were I was surrounded by non-believers, you know, and like obviously like we have these really in-depth talks about this kind of stuff, and I felt kind of like, man, I don't really have anyone to talk to this stuff about, but through just like good friendship, you guys were able to, I think, just hear me out on what I had to say. And then ultimately God started working in your all's lives as well. And then now all of my best friends are believers. And it's like, whoa, that is insane to me. Like it's just like been happening one by one by one. And it's not
Yeah.
anything that like I ever intended to like happen. Like I wanted it to happen and I prayed for it, but it's like, gosh, to see it actually come through. Like now I'm getting a little like teary eyed because it's like it's not of my own will, you know what I mean? It's like God working his ways, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just really cool. It's like now everyone, all my closest friends have found Christianity, and it's crazy.
Well, because that's the thing is that you said it that I think explains where my like fears came from and the shame came from is that good, but that's the answer is within the answer is that I was raised Catholic. I've always been a believer. But that's the thing. That's the whole thing is that that's always how I've looked at it. I was raised Catholic. Never I am this or I was this. Like I never but that's it. I was just raised Catholic. But where's the like where that's just empty. You know what I mean?
Right.
And because I didn't want to, I thought of it as myself as being weak in my conviction and in my faith by being like James converted me because I'm like, well, I can't be converted because I never stopped believing in God, and I can't be like, and what, just one other person, like just because everyone else is doing it, I'm doing it too, and like those were all those things that were kind of playing in my head, but then like thinking about what we've all come to these conclusions of with these conversations and that you know it's no longer a sense of believing, it's a sense of knowing, and it's like I said, it just makes sense. And the fact that I've just been in my own heart like and to other people referring to myself as Christians, and one of the ways that I've always connected to God too is music. And in the Tarzan soundtrack, hear me out, there's a song called Son of Man. And it makes sense as a parallel to Tarzan because he's the one man in a troop of gorillas. So, of course, he is the Son of Man. But the way that Jesus says he is the Son of Man in the first way he really like truly reveals himself like that, like, so it's already you see a connection the like the story arc of Tarzan growing up to become the savior of his tribe and the bridge between two worlds, one family, which is the main song of the show. There's a line in it, in that song where he says, "In learning." Sorry, my voice is shot from that concert last night, man. I sounded like Sugar Factory Travis at the end of it, but in learning you will teach, and in teaching you will learn. And it's what?
Sorry. Well, Jake just got like a little like he like looked up at me and just went, "Arr," and I like just slightly pulled on his leash and he just went like put his head down.
Well, but yeah, the reason that line of Son of Man is sticking out to me is in learning you will teach, and in teaching you will learn. It's the way that within the last like I'd say week or so, I've started to notice that I'm becoming, I mean, maybe I don't mean to be arrogant in saying this. It's just an observation, but I feel like I'm starting to notice that I'm starting to become a bit of a pillar for my friends, where like what happened with Kelly when I went out to the bars. Like I went out after 10:30 to go to the bar. But like that's something I used to do a lot where I would go and get fucked up and just be doing that. Didn't have a single sip of anything. I left in due time, but like I get there and we were talking that night about, I don't want to say Christian prosecution, but the idea that like we're trying to be, if we're supposed to spread the word and do like help people come to see the light. Well, if we're just telling them Bible scripture and screaming at them, that's not really going to work. You know what I mean? And it's not so much like we have to, it's the way to do it right is you have to take a sense of control out of it. I feel like you can't force anybody to do it. Our job is to kind of just be there to help show the way when they're ready, type of thing, and be willing to guide, you know?
Well,
And
yeah, and I think showing people love is one of the biggest things. Like, because
absolutely.
a lot of people think like, oh, just because you probably don't love me because I don't think the way that you do, and it's like, no, man, that's not the case. I love you for being you. Like nobody's right about everything.
And it was the way that Kelly, even though she was tipsy and she was all like interrupty and giggly and everything, it was the way that she said, the fact that you were open about it makes me feel like I can talk about it now. I've never really had people around me to talk to about it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I mean, sure, I'm down to chat about it, but I'm nowhere near, I feel like, a person to teach anything because I don't really know anything myself. And all I can do is just share my experiences. But isn't that kind of how it always goes?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then being in the
God will
car,
help you in those moments to like talk about or think about the things that you need to or want to discuss in that moment.
That's
in
a
learning,
prayer I say quite a bit. Like, just Lord, give me the words to say.
in learning, you will teach. And I really started to notice it yesterday on the way into Universal because I feel so bad about this, but my dear friend who lost her mother, like she's always had stuff that's just really not like made life harder for her than she needs it to be. And it's a natural, I feel like it's a natural thing, but like, I'm definitely on watch, especially right after it happened, to just, be there for her and everything. But it started to get to a point where more on the recent side, like after some time, I would get a notification from her from a text, and my first thought wasn't, how can I help? It was, what is it now? And I feel awful for that. But like, it's just the way that there's always something negative, this and that, whatever. And I'm trying to be like, well, hey, listen, like, think about the perspective here. But we're in the car on the way in, and we start talking, and we just start talking about faith and stuff because of course she lost her mother. Of course God's plan is a conversation that's going to come up in her heart, you know. And she's talking about how what's really nice is that there's nothing that's come along that's made her question the faith part of things. Like losing her mother has not made her turn her back on anything. If anything, it's making her faith stronger, which is a really good thing. And it was just in the conversation that we were saying, I felt I noticed a change in my words, like my interpretation of things and like what I've learned is just I realized like for the first time, like, oh, I'm actually learning something here. Like, and it's
Yeah.
sticking with me. And I don't know, I wouldn't want to have this journey with anybody else by my side,
Yeah,
I don't
man,
need
absolutely.
I don't need you guys because I only is God, but I need you guys too, like
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're called to help people, right?
Yeah.
And we're called to love people. It's
like Jedi.
the second great commandment, right? Equally as important as the first, right? So I kind of want to touch base on like what you were saying about how you were feeling when like Bryce decided to become a Christian, I think that's an experience that a lot of people who aren't Christian start having if someone in their life becomes a Christian. It's like, oh crap, here we go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that's what Devin's kind of going through right now. You know what I mean? And it's kind of weird that that's the immediate reaction a lot of the time, isn't it?
Well, I think that society's kind of like conditioned us to feel that way, to think that way.
Mhm.
Right.
Because, and it's not just people who don't believe, but like the people who do believe that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
we've talked about this several times where like you'll have someone who says like they're a Christian, they believe in God, but then they turn around and are treating people like crap. And it's like they're not really doing the things that are right by what Jesus taught us. Right. So a lot of people think that that's religion. Like, oh, you just accept Jesus and then you do whatever you want anyway. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that's not the
Yep.
reality of the situation. That's just the surface level stuff that people are seeing. But
Yeah,
it's
that or
also
then you start doing everything and then you become holier than thou, right?
right. Yeah. You start condemning other people,
Mhm.
talking about how there's so much sin and they turn around, they're sinning behind closed doors, like, and then it's also like society who is rejecting God, who's saying like, oh, I wouldn't put a label on that, or you're offending me because you're talking about God or Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, so I think
Mhm.
it's just multiple things going on in the society that we've created that are really like pushing people away from, calling themselves Christians.
Right,
And it I can definitely understand it. It's a level of fear that people have. They don't want to be rejected,
right.
but you have to put that fear aside. And I think that's what we've been doing a pretty good job of lately
Right.
is,
I agree.
pre-
It's also interesting that like when, like we were saying, like whenever you start diving into your faith, you start getting more attacks. Well, the people around you who are also are in faith and out of faith also start getting attacks, like in the spiritual warfare. So it's like you even said that thing, Travis, where it's like, oh, James is converting me. It's like in essence, maybe like that might be what it sounds like, seems like. But like if you can have like the demonic presence put thoughts into your head, they don't like somebody because they're a messenger of God, essentially. They're gonna try and make you want to not like that person. So it's like James is
Yeah,
converting everybody. And it's like that's not the case.
you're right. Like
right.
I seethe about you every day, but it's not because of the converting thing. It's just because I can't stand your ass sometimes, man.
They
Like,
can't stand
but the thing is, like, it's just like anything that ever like if I ever have any like negative thoughts about you two, it's literally just the I love my brother. Like it's like the same stuff that you guys would probably like say about me, like where it's just like, man, Travis was talking a lot tonight, wasn't he? It's just like, yup, there's no less love there. It's just okay, Travis, we don't need to hear this part of the song 17 times in a row. And I'm like, but listen, like this, right? So and but like as far as the converting thing, it wasn't so much coming from a place of oh no, James is converting everybody. And I don't like that. It's just more so like it was a selfish thing for me being like my own pride and ego being like, I can't be so easily swayed. I already believe in God. I don't need to be like I can't be converted. I'm already there. But it's just like, no, you're not. Like, are you talking like it's the same thing with like the Jesus is my or God's my friend and God being like, no, I'm not. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think my point in bringing that up was just like it can start. It's like resentment starts growing out of stuff
Mhm.
like that. So it's like in that what was that word is that you just used for how you were feeling about it? Was it
Shame,
um
pride.
pride? Yeah. It's kind of like pride, and through pride starts coming resentment towards other people because of that. So like obviously I don't think you hold any resentment against me now, but it's like it
No.
was starting to manifest even in the way of like crap James is doing this, and it's like wow, it's like I'm not going out actively converting people to Christ, right? Like I'll talk to people about it if they want to talk to, and then
Right.
I'll like talk about my own experiences and my knowledge that I have with it. But ultimately,
Right.
my knowledge is not mine. like it's God's. So it's like you read the Bible and I'm just going to tell you what I've heard and what I think. Is that me going and converting people? No.
Right.
Right.
Because even think about like what it was is like if it's just like, oh, James is converting people, this and that, it's like that takes away from Bryce. Like Bryce is the one that made the decision. Bryce
Right.
is the one that came
Yeah,
to
I
you.
came to James and was like, I want to know more.
Like James didn't do that to Bryce.
Right.
You know?
It
Yeah.
was the
And that was
experiences that I went through
Mhm.
that led me to God.
And that just
Right.
goes to show you how that's just not real. That's not the case. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
But through that resentment can grow. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, now I'm pissed because people are becoming Christian. It's like already you're off to like, oh, like, wait a minute, hold on, what? But then now
Yeah.
it starts growing resentment for certain people. And this can be exemplified with anybody, not just myself. You
'cause
know, and
again,
it's now you start to like get annoyed by people because they talk about their faith. And it's like,
and
wow, now you're getting
well,
resentful.
on the other end of that, like you have seen it before where it's like they go from being a person you can talk to about everything and what you're going through, what like sharing experiences, to then they turn into Vin with guns. You know what I mean? It's the only thing that they can talk about is God's love to the point where it's just like, yeah, man, like I had a cool dream about fighting a dragon, and then I woke up and got coffee. Well, the thing was, God sent the vision of the dragon, and God gave you the coffee, and it's like, okay, that's true, I guess, but like, okay, calm down. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
and
totally.
to those things, I can understand like the aversion, that kind of comes with
Oh, I
it.
totally get it. Yeah. And I
Like
get
I
it if
saw
you're not a Christian too. Like it makes complete sense. But at that same token, like even if you're not a Christian, to realize that that resentment is growing over an idea that
right.
you just yourself don't want to talk about is kind of
I
fascinating.
saw this interesting like YouTube short, and I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't finish it just because it was like stuff like this frustrates me, and a lot of like arguments on news stations and political debates and stuff that go on now. I can't sit through the whole thing just because the way that they go about talking to each other and arguing is so wrong that it
Mhm.
frustrates me to no end. And I'm like, I'm not like me watching this is going to do nothing. It's not going to educate me. It's not going to help me come to a conclusion. It's just going to make me angry. Right. So I skipped through it. But what it was a guy on the street with a microphone preaching, but it was very much the like preaching with the obvious and vocally clear intent to be like spew hate towards LGBT stuff, right? And I want to make it very clear on the recording that I'm not going to take any stance on anything about it. If you want to ask me about my feelings about these kinds of issues, have a beer with me, right? But the fact is, what this was happening is this guy is on the street with a microphone, like yelling about Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, man created, or like God created man to be with the woman, and this stuff, like all of that kind of typical stuff that you hear in modern Christian versus or religious versus non-religious conversations. And this other pastor walks up, and she was a little bit older, an older woman that, based on her vibe, her visual vibe, she's one of those gals that you can tell is probably a little bit more hip, liberal, and like progressive in her beliefs. And so it turns into them arguing over scripture about loving thy neighbor versus God creating men for women and women for men. And it turns into him saying, so, but God, in the scripture, God created man and woman. Marriage is between a man and a woman. And he's saying all this, and he's getting like angry, and he's like sweating and stuff. And she ends up shrieking, "You, you are lost. What is the goal? Like, what is the one thing in scripture that it says, love God, love thy neighbor?" And they start screaming back and forth at each other, and a crowd starts to. I scrolled up because I I couldn't finish it. But what I thought was interesting about it was the way that it's two people who are Christian, self-proclaimed Christians, and the way that they're arguing on the street and preaching their version and interpretation of the scripture, and the way that it just doesn't feel like what you're supposed to do. Like, regardless of what evidence the man was doing and providing or whatever, it's like when the modern layman's idea of Christianity is people on the street screaming how gay people should burn in hell. You know, that I can 100% understand an aversion to, you know,
Right.
like when you hear someone's becoming a Christian, like, I get it.
Well, they immediately equate it with that kind of stuff. In biblical literature in America is an F, and not even like a
Yeah.
50%. It's
Oh, you
like,
mean media literacy?
yeah, like it's
Yeah.
like 20%. No, just like
Just
people's
societal
general knowledge.
literacy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
on Christianity as a whole, it's like super low. Like when I talk to people about like my belief, people will just come in with the assumption of, oh, this is what you believe. I'm like, no, it's not. Like where do you even get some of these ideas? And it's like some of the things that are asked, like when people find out that I'm a Christian, it's like, no, I don't believe that. It's like, well, a lot of you do. It's like, no, not a lot of us do. Like,
thing, man, is that like since this is the first period of my life that I've truly been reading the Bible, right? And so there's things that I'm learning that I've never really learned before with it. And a lot of the things that I'm seeing on social media and hearing in conversation about, you know, like coming from people on commenting on stuff who are giving their takes on Christianity and this and that. And I'm reading stuff and the examples that they're using to either defend bigoted views or be anti-Christian and everything. I read them and I'm like, yeah, but like I'm literally reading the Bible right now where they're talking about this. You're wrong. Like,
Yep.
That's not what, and like a lot of stuff where people are trying to defend like mean shit, like, you know, those really mean Christians and like those old archaic kind of like awful people. So many of the scriptures that they're quoting are like incredibly Old Testament stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like,
well, it's just taken out of context.
Yeah, that too. And I'm just like,
Definitely
okay,
can
like,
be.
you read the rest of that, or is that just like the cherry picking? You know what I mean? And so
Right.
it's just,
Yeah. You pull one verse that backs up your argument, but when you actually read that whole chapter, it has nothing to do with your argument. You know what I mean? Like,
By the
or
way, I
very
got to get
little.
off here in like 2 minutes. My sister's about to show up.
That's fine.
That's
No
cool.
worries. Actually, I think it'd be a good way to end it here. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to say a prayer ending.
Yeah, take it away, man.
absolutely, man.
All right. Lord God, thank you for this fellowship that we've had today. Please help us in growing our relationship with you, growing closer to you. Jesus, thank you for sacrificing your body and shedding your blood so that way we may be forgiven and have eternal life with you and the Father. Lord God, I pray that we continue to do these studies and grow closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Hey, brother. But yeah, great note it ended on. This was a fun little. I'm glad that I got to be a part of it. It's funny,
man.
Yeah.
because when Bryce
Well,
called me,
let's end it real quick. God bless y'all.
Yeah.
smash that like button.
Yeah.